Okay, here I am, everybody. I guess the focus here is answering some questions that Aaron is receiving in the comment section of his video, and we're going to answer them live.
I saw a comment and I feel like the man contradicted himself.
Is it this video that's in the lounge chat that Raheem sent?
Yeah, it's Aaron's video.
Alright.
You did want me to answer these, right, Aaron?
If you
Are you around, Aaron?
Yeah, he just says, of course, he's gonna chat right now.
Well, Aaron, you made the video, so I'm gonna test you. Now, what you said in the video is true, but one of the reasons we tell you guys it's wise not to get into debates until you're very well versed yourself is because of this. If you are asking us for the answer to some objection that somebody makes, you're showing that although you're saying, I'm not going to quickly fall, I'm not going to be easily convinced by these people who I know to be heretics, still you're admitting you don't know the answer to something. And you always have a choice. Whenever you hear an objection that you don't know the answer to, you have the choice to either let that cause you to doubt, or if you are firmly set on the foundation of truth and ancient tradition and universality of the church, then it won't bother you. You'll say, I don't know the answer to that question, but it doesn't bother me because I know there is an answer. And I know that your little objection could not possibly overthrow what I know to be true. For instance, somebody could ask you a question about the Trinity, such as, why doesn't Jesus know the day or the hour of his return? You could say, that's an interesting question. I don't know that one. But I know that Jesus is divine. You're never going to convince me he's not divine. And understand, guys, you're not required to know the the answer to every question. However, you will make the faith look bad, and you'll make our fellowship look bad because we represent the early church. If you don't jump into a debate without having knowledge, so don't be ready for a debate. You can say things that are true. You can speak the truth just in your daily life, no matter who you're talking to, an atheist, anybody. They may make objections that you're not prepared to answer, but don't let that shake your faith. And don't be arrogant and don't be egotistical and say, well, I'm going to engage in the debate and I'm going to throw out some random answer there and risk saying something wrong. No, don't do that. And you can always choose one of two options when you're talking to somebody. You can say, if somebody's saying something you don't know the answer, you can either say, I just don't know the answer to that. Or you can also say, you're not worthy of engaging because you don't really love the truth. You need to start with foundational principles and say, if you don't love what was from the beginning, then I'm not going to engage in a debate with you. Always establish principles and philosophies with people first. Make them admit that if it can be established that something was believed universally in the church, then it has to be true. And if they say, well, no, well, if even if you can prove that it was universally believed by the entire church for hundreds of years, even if you can prove that, it's still false. And these councils that come along later have the power to override what was believed by the whole church for hundreds of years, dogmatically, under threat of excommunication. We just have the power to overthrow that. If they dare say that, don't engage anymore, because that is an obviously false statement. If somebody dares say that, you don't engage anymore, especially with an Orthodox or a Catholic. It's bad enough if a Protestant says it, but if a Cathodox says it, well, it's even worse because they will lie to people in order to get people to join their church. They'll say, well, we're the original church. They say that. But then when they talk to us, they admit, well, our doctrines had to develop over time, which they really mean our doctrines had to be reversed over time. Okay, here's Knockin'. And I'll read his comment. Let me get a drink of water. Okay, among other comments, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see exactly what. Yeah, that's not going to work.
You're
Okay,
not
Knockin
you're
says,
not sharing your screen.
oh, and I should also share screens. Everybody see my screen? Here, maybe I'll sign into no one's.
if you rec
All right, here we
Wait, are
are.
you gonna record this?
Yes, I am. I am recording. Okay, I'm sorry if there are any bad suggested videos. That's obnoxious. Good grief. Okay, here we go. He says there are many issues with this argument. First, claiming that the Orthodox Church is wrong because the Patriarch of Russia goes against the Fathers is a flawed straw man argument. We do not base our faith on the actions or views of a single questionable patriarch. Okay, so he's saying the patriarch of the entire Russian Orthodox Church does not represent the Orthodox Church. Can anybody name any problems with that? If you guys can't think of any, then I'll name a few. So there's about
Yeah,
110 million members in the Russian Orthodox Church.
yeah. If he doesn't have the faith, if he's the top guy and he doesn't have it, then who does? You know?
Yes. Also, if this person, Nakin, as well as many others, can look at the patriarch and say, oh, he's clearly corrupt. He's clearly wicked. And he's like, but he doesn't represent the church. Wait a second. How can someone who's clearly corrupt and clearly wicked and clearly heretical, not even a Christian, how can he be a patriarch? Who made him a patriarch? What systems are in place to get rid of him? Why isn't he gone out of the church? You guys realize if there was a bishop in the early church teaching even 1/10 of the heresy of a guy like Kirill of Moscow, he'd be kicked out so fast. They would send bishops to excommunicate that guy so fast. How did this guy get in power? And of course the answer is, it's all government run, guys. In order to overthrow a patriarch, the patriarch of Moscow, you have to overthrow the government because the government put him in power. And as that really great video show that we once gave to you guys, really great short little video. It's let's see here, Patriarch of Moscow corruption. It's let's see here, this one. All of you guys should watch this. It's called KGB Past, Churches, Billions, and War. And in this video you can see they give a little bit of the history of what happened during the Soviet regime in the early 1920s and 30s and 40s. But the Soviets killed off all the priests in Russia. And all of the ordinations that were done after that were, even according to the Orthodox standards, illegitimate. Because their succession was destroyed. Now, of course, their succession was destroyed long before that, but it's almost like God allows there to be multiple events throughout history in every generation, or maybe every century or so, just to convince you that it's already been destroyed. If it wasn't destroyed last century, it certainly was destroyed this century. And so, yes, he's a completely fake bishop. He's the most corrupt, despicable person, literally a billionaire, owning oil companies, friends with a murderer, friends with, a KGB agent, which is one of the worst. Guys, a KGB agent is somebody who's tasked with not just like espionage, but he tortures people. That's the KGB job. He kills and tortures people for the government. He's a spy. He's a secret agent, and that's what Vladimir Putin was. It's what this guy Kirill was. He was recruited by the KGB. So they think that that's okay, though. That's just normal. That's fine. You guys should ask a series of questions to any Orthodox. Ask them a series of questions. If you are a heretic, if you are denying the faith with your actions and your teachings, are you a Christian? And if they say, yeah, you're still a Christian, if you're denying the faith with your words and actions, but you're still a bishop, ask them how that's possible. How can I hold church leadership? How can I hold the office of a bishop and at the same time not even be a Christian? Can a non-Christian be a bishop? Does that make any sense? You guys know what the early church teaches? They teach that if you can see your bishop openly committing sin or practicing any kind of wicked, adultery, or even if you were to send your son to public school, a heathen school, like Cyprian talks about in letter 67, they say you guys should not even be with that bishop. Flee from him. Run away from him. And that's not what the Orthodox teach. They say stay with that guy because he was ordained with a false ordination. Okay, so this is a really, really concerning thing to say. That, well, first of all, the patriarch, the guy in charge, the guy elected to represent the Russian Orthodox Church, he just doesn't represent the Orthodox Church. Really? Is that not like, are we in opposite world right now? The main person appointed to represent the whole church, the person with the most authority in the church, does not represent the church? Interesting. If he doesn't, who does? Just nobody does? Give me a break. Also, why are all the other bishops in communion with him? Ask them that. Why are they all in communion with this wicked man? Why haven't they excommunicated him? Actually, guess what, guys? In 2018, let's see here, Kirill of Moscow excommunicated. The Constantinople Schism. The Eastern Schism, also known as the 2018 Moscow-Constantinople Schism, is a schism between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, which began on the 15th of October 2018, when the former unilaterally severed when the former, meaning the Russian Orthodox Church, unilaterally severed communion with the latter. The resolution was taken in response to a decision of the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, confirming its intentions to grant autocephaly to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine in the future. All this political stuff. So the Orthodox Church in Ukraine wants to become independent from the Russian Orthodox Church, and they're saying, no, if you do that, you're going to be excommunicated. The Russian Orthodox Church wants to remain in control over Ukraine. All this ridiculous political stuff. So guys, you even have major branches of Orthodoxy, the Orthodox Church, excommunicating others, saying you're not Christians, and you're not a real patriarch anymore. You're outside of the church. And yet they tell us, well, don't you know that, this isn't problematic for the Orthodox Church? It's just one man. Yeah, it's one man who's being excommunicated even by your own other Orthodox patriarchs, which is the highest office you can have in the Orthodox Church. You don't see that as problematic. Are we just supposed to watch that and just say, oh, the patriarch's getting excommunicated by another patriarch, but we're fine. They're not having communion with each other, but I'll keep having communion with my excommunicated patriarch. Just chaos. If you join the Orthodox Church, you are joining chaos land. So you can either be on the Russian Orthodox Church, you can refuse to have communion with the other Orthodox denominations, or you can be with the Bishop of Constantinople or Antioch, or you can be with the Oriental Orthodox churches, which are not in communion with any of the others. They're not in communion with Greek or Russian. It's really just a smorgasbord, like a buffet. You go there and you just choose which dish you like. That's what it's like joining the Orthodox Church. So it says, additionally, the assertion that all the church fathers taught the same doctrine, such as the divinity of Christ, and the same eschatology, is incorrect. For example, Origen taught ideas like apokatastasis and subordinationism, which are inconsistent with Orthodox teaching. That's quite astonishing on multiple levels, that he would say, this is false, it's incorrect that the church taught the divinity of Christ. And he doesn't even just say early church fathers, he just says that all the church fathers. How could anybody consider a man to be a church father if he doesn't teach the divinity of Christ? Nobody in church history has ever been referred to as a church father if he denies the divinity of Christ, guys. I don't know what planet he's living on, but you deny Christ's divinity, you deny the most fundamental doctrine of this entire faith. How can I even be a Christian if I deny the divinity of Christ, let alone be in leadership? All the church fathers of the first 3 centuries teach that Christ is divine. And do you guys know what makes somebody a church father? Do you know how he becomes recognized as a church father? It's that he's respected and lauded by so many people all around the world, so many bishops and laity, who all refer to him and see his great surpassing wisdom, and that his reputation continues like this and builds for so many centuries. They recognize him as a great teacher of the church. He was never excommunicated. He was always recognized to be faithful and full of wisdom, full of the Holy Spirit. So guys, nobody ends up receiving that kind of title of church father, at least in the first 3 centuries, unless they were a very great man who did teach the faith. And even if Tertullian did get excommunicated, still we're not to reject all of his teachings, which were orthodox, leading up to the time of his excommunication. He would not have become so universally loved and respected if he had always taught heresy. It's something he started to, and on very specific issues. He never denied the divinity of Christ. Okay, so this is crazy. You guys understand the point here? I mean, this guy is just dreaming here. You think that church fathers can deny Christ's divinity? And he's going to talk about some little nuance. Well, they maybe somebody missed some little nuance of Christ's divinity that we Orthodox think is super important, more important than murder and adultery and idolatry and blasphemy, more important than war and divorce and remarriage and bowing to images and calling Mary our sinless mediator. We want to talk about whether Jesus had a one, two natures or one combined nature. We want to talk about whether Jesus had a human soul or just a divine person residing in his body. We want to talk about all these little nuances of his divinity, and they're going to say some of those early church fathers they didn't really understand that. That's what they're talking about. But none of them guys would ever just deny Jesus' divinity. They're quibbling over tiny little details, which even in the first 3 centuries, nobody's going to deny an essential aspect of Christ's divinity. Sometimes people just pry into things that they really shouldn't. And eschatology, guys, do you guys know what eschatology is? That's just understanding of what's going to happen in the afterlife, or things that are going to happen in the end times when Jesus is returning. And they're saying, well, they don't all agree on eschatology. Well, Knockin, you just proved that the early church is in perfect agreement then. If these are your best examples, eschatology, when the early church doesn't quite understand exactly what's going to happen in the afterlife or in the time or in the end times, that's your best example of the church not all agreeing. Try again. You can't make a doctrine out of those things when they're beyond our knowledge. So many of these things haven't happened yet. We're talking about prophecies. We're talking about interpreting prophecies like Revelation, which is very difficult. And as the church fathers all say, prophecy is really mysterious. It's dark. It's covered, it's enveloped in a shadow that only becomes unveiled once the events are actually transpiring. And until then, it's deliberately obscured. You're only supposed to be able to catch certain details that once the events are actually happening, then you recognize, the prophecy is happening right now. But leading up to it, it's hard to see what exactly it's referring to. That's how prophecy is designed. You can't hold that against the early church, that they don't know what all these prophecies in Revelation are talking about exactly. And he says, an Origen had apokatastasis and subordinationism. If you go online right now, I know on Wikipedia they have this little, I mean, maybe that's all this guy did is go on Wikipedia or something. You go on there, guys, they have this little section where they say, and Origen was a subordinationist. They say that. And they say, now, all the church fathers were subordinationists for the first 3 centuries. However, we're going to pick on Origen. He's a subordinationist. Subordinationist just means that you believe Christ is under the authority of the Father. And that's true. Everybody taught that. Everybody believed that. Even after Nicaea, all the bishops who were perfectly orthodox in their beliefs and still considered orthodox by the Catholics and Orthodox, all those bishops taught that Jesus is subordinate to the Father. Subordinationism. Knock it off. And then apokatastasis. This is another false accusation against Origen. This is just the word universalism, but they like to use big words. Aaron, do you understand he's trying to intimidate you by using these words? He could just say universalism, but instead he says apokatastasis. That's the Greek version of just universalism, the idea that all souls go to heaven. And Aaron, you've already seen Origen vehemently denied that he believed that. They only take ambiguous quotes from him to say that. Now, do you want to know the really hilarious irony here? It's that the Orthodox actually have many teachers in their church who they consider some of the greatest, like Isaac the Syrian. They love this guy. We were talking to Bob, that call that we uploaded of us talking to an Orthodox monk. This is a guy living in the 600s here, Isaac the Syrian. He was talking about how much he loves this guy. And, he was even bringing up the fact, he's like, I know that he's a universalist. I know he teaches that there is no eternal hellfire and that all souls are going to be saved in the end. He's like, but still, I really love him. And the whole Orthodox Church just loves the guy. So, guys, the Orthodox themselves have people in their church that teach universalism, and yet they only pick on Origen. And the accusation against Origen isn't even true. Can you believe the hypocrisy? Views on universal
Double
reconciliation.
standard.
Yes. So this guy, Isaac the Syrian, he teaches universalism. They're aware of it. They know it. It's just a big game. They're banking on you being completely ignorant. Okay, I will go to the next paragraph. He says, moreover, the claim that icon veneration was condemned in the early church is simply wrong. In fact, we have evidence of Christian catacombs and icons of Christ dating as early as the 2nd century. Full stop. Wait a second. Where's the proof that anybody was bowing to those paintings? You can't call something icon veneration if you are unable to prove that anybody was bowing to it or kissing it or burning incense to it or lighting candles around it or crowning it. You guys know the Orthodox Church has this practice of crowning icons, and the Catholics do as well. Let's see, they put like little garlands on them. Let's see here, icons in Orthodox Church. So kiss it. You know, they have this practice. You're going through, you're doing the liturgy, you receive their Eucharist, their polluted Eucharist, and you need to go up there and kiss the icon. It's a real joke, though, because, you know, they're just kissing the glass. They wouldn't want you to actually kiss it because then you'd mess up the painting. So they say, put a big, thick piece of glass on there. You're actually kissing the glass. Good luck to you if you get a blessing from the glass you're kissing. They actually require this. They command it. You know, you're anathema in the Orthodox Church if you don't kiss the icons, or rather the glass, I'm sorry. If you don't kiss the glass, you're anathema. They say you're accursed. Anyway, I mean, it's so ridiculous. They would require that you kiss a dead image, but they don't require you do what the apostles command. Greet one another with a holy kiss, they say. Greet the brethren with a holy kiss. That's an actual command in Scripture. That's a command to kiss the actual image of God. Do they kiss the actual image of God, or do they kiss this dead picture or some dead glass? No, they reverse everything. They're satanic. So again, icon veneration, can you prove that anybody was bowing to those paintings? See, guys, they are saying, we've got some paintings. We can prove to you that in some ancient catacombs there were some paintings. Congratulations. So let me steel man your argument here. They say steel man. They like to use all these phrases, straw man, steel man. Steel man is just when you represent their argument in its true form, you know, as accurately as possible. You represent their argument so well that even they would say, yes, that is my argument. You're not misrepresenting it. That's exactly what I'm saying. So this is their argument, guys. It doesn't matter if all the church fathers for the first 400 years of church history, it doesn't matter if all of them say bowing to images is idolatry. It doesn't matter because we have some pictures, some catacombs, and we wish, we imagine, we hope that the early Christians were bowing to those images. So we're going to disregard all of the evidence of the church condemning this practice of bowing to images. And we're going to say if you just find a painting, that's proof that the church was, you know, Christians were bowing to it and that the leaders approved of it. Is that a good argument? You have a clear choice, guys. You can either believe the church universally condemning this, saying you'll burn in hell for eternity if you bow down to a work of your own hands, a dead image, a lifeless image. You'll either burn in hell for eternity, or you're accursed if you don't bow down to that image. You guys have a clear choice here. The Orthodox and Catholics say one thing, the early church says the other. You have a clear choice, either the unanimous testimony of the church fathers for 400 and really close to 500 years, or you have some paintings on a wall, some paintings which don't even say that you're supposed to bow to them or that anybody bowed to those images. Those are your two choices. All the church fathers saying don't do it or you're damned, or you can look at some paintings and believe a ridiculous argument that people were bowing to those paintings when there's absolutely no evidence and all evidence to the contrary. That's your choice. Let me see if I can get to the website we have. You guys understand my arguments? Any questions so far? Yeah, it's a hard one, guys. It's a hard choice for me, honestly. I'm hard pressed to choose between all the church fathers telling me here and the scriptures, all the church fathers telling me, do not bow down to these images or you're accursed. Or I must bow down to them, or else I'm accursed. and they're just playing games. Aaron, this is a game they're playing when they say the claim that icon veneration was condemned in the early church is simply wrong. Well, if you show him the quotes, he's going to say all the quotes are wrong. And he's going to say, ignore those quotes, look at these paintings. Your response should then be, great paintings. These are some beautiful paintings. What makes you think anybody was bowing to these? And they're going to say, well, we bow down to images. We bow down to paintings. And you could say, oh, that's great. What do you have to say about the whole church condemning bowing to images? And they're going to say, just look at the paintings. They're so pretty. Bow to them. Okay, he says, furthermore, using your logic, the ecumenical councils would be invalid. That's correct. As they taught doctrines not explicitly held by some early church fathers. You see, the truth is coming out. First he says...
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah. First he says it wasn't condemned. That's simply wrong. Also, using your logic, the ecumenical councils must be wrong because the church fathers condemn bowing to images. And their teachings have evolved over time. Whose teachings have evolved over time? The early church's teachings evolved over time, or your teachings evolved over time? First 3 centuries were not evolving, guys. They were rock steady. He says, if this reasoning were applied consistently, one would have to reject the validity of all the councils. Oh, you mean like some of your favorite church fathers?
He's destroying himself. It's so funny.
Let's see here. Let's see if I can get it. Let me get this great quote. This great quote from one of their favorite church fathers saying he rejects every synod. Let's see here.
I guess it wasn't that comment, but it was similar.
Here, give me a second. Let me pull it up here. Give me a second. This is why I will get all this organized for you guys so you can have it all sitting there for you. Let's see here. It's Gregory of Nazianzus, though. He just says, if I'm honest, he says, I'm tempted to reject every synod. But he doesn't say he uses the word synod, but I don't remember what he says. Oh well. I'd like to read you the quote. I would like to read you the quote, but it's going to take me too long. Oh man. Well, let's just keep it going. Their own Gregory of Nazianzus, a doctor of the church, says he rejects every synod because they contradict each other. Okay, we'll just keep reading the dumbness. Okay. Yes, reject the validity of all the councils. Well, yeah. I mean, I love how he says reject the validity of all councils. You know how absurd it is to say such a thing, guys? All councils. He just means the 7 councils that he likes, the 7 ecumenical councils. So, guys, I want you to understand how these councils actually work. I want to show you something on Google. Let's go up to Google. We're going to look up first Byzantine, we're going to say first iconoclast crisis. Okay. So, guys, you've got some iconoclasm. Iconoclasm means destroying icons, okay? There were, the first period, they say the first iconoclasm, as is sometimes called, occurred between 726 and 787. So 787, that's when they had what they call the Second Council of Nicaea, which they also call the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So that was the last ecumenical council, or you might say the last council recognized as universal and binding on all Christians, the last one recognized by both the Catholics and Orthodox. After that, there were many councils, but since the Catholics and Orthodox split, they started saying, well, we consider these councils to be ecumenical, and then the Orthodox will respond to the Catholics, no, those aren't ecumenical, we disagree. But these other councils that we have privately, these are ecumenical. So they fight with each other. So there are really only 7 councils that the Catholics and Orthodox can agree are ecumenical. But they each privately say many councils are ecumenical, which neither of them agree with. Okay, but let's see. Do you guys know what criteria the Orthodox and Catholics have for what makes a council ecumenical? What makes it universal and binding on all Christians? Can anybody guess what the criteria are?
They agree with the councils.
Well, I mean, guys, please send me an email. If you can ever find an article or anything explaining to me what makes a council ecumenical, what are the criteria? Doesn't exist. None of them have ever explained it. It doesn't make any sense. I once found an article where they played a little game and they said, well, Augustine once gave some criteria for what makes a council ecumenical. They say that. You'll always hear that. They'll always bring up Augustine. He gives some pretty good criteria. Well, guys, Augustine calls the Council of 314, the Council of Arles, he calls that an ecumenical council. Neither the Catholics nor the Orthodox consider that an ecumenical council. So I know these are little tidbits. It's hard to keep track of this. But if anybody tells you Augustine gives a great list of criteria for what makes an ecumenical council, sorry, he considers councils to be ecumenical that you don't. It's really up to personal opinion. This is for you guys to fight about in your little corner with a dunce hat on your head. It's not for us. Because we're not involved with your government. Every single so-called ecumenical council was convened by a wicked emperor. Not by a Christian. Not by a bishop. Okay, so you guys might wonder, why is it that in the 700s we're having a huge controversy about images? You know, if image worship has been always condemned, if bowing to images has always been condemned, why wasn't it condemned much sooner? Well, the answer is because it wasn't endorsed by bishops for so long. It wasn't until the 700s, when you have guys like John of Damascus and Andrew of Crete, who are saying, oh yeah, bowing to images is good, that it even comes into question. The church even discusses it. Now, the Catholics and Orthodox, they look at this period between 726 and 787. They say, oh, this is the first iconoclast crisis. But what that really means is, guys, this is the first time in church history that a large number of church leaders actually went along with this, actually said, yeah, let's do it. There were no people doing it before this, at least not for a century. It took a long time for it to get to this point. Now, why do they say there are two periods? There's the first iconoclastic crisis, and then a second one immediately after, from 814 to 842. This should seem a little suspicious to you guys. So before and after this so-called ecumenical council, guys, all the bishops and even all the emperors, when they hear some people proposing bowing to images, they're saying, and when I say all, I mean the vast majority of these bishops, the fake bishops, they're all saying, that's crazy. We are never going to bow down to images. And then right after the Second Council of Nicaea, which was held in Constantinople, guys, the not the next bishop of Constantinople, but the bishop right after that, he goes along and says, actually, that council was ridiculous. And the emperor at the time says, yeah, that was stupid. Let's have a council in Constantinople to overrule that. So they had the council in 815. The council which overthrew this so-called council. Here it's called. The Council of Constantinople of 815 was held in the Byzantine capital and initiated the second period of the Byzantine iconoclasm. The Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, or the Second Council of Nicaea, in 787, allowed icon veneration. That just means bowing to images. And they actually said you're accursed if you don't do it. However, there were monks at the Studion Monastery in Constantinople who were iconoclasts, opposed to icons. I guarantee you guys, some Catholic or Orthodox wrote this part. Like, what does that have to do with anything? It's such a random thing to say. Was it monks that had this massive council with the emperor and other bishops? No. Shortly after it convened, the iconophile, meaning the icon lover, Patriarch Nicephorus, was deposed by Emperor Leo V in favor of the iconoclast Theodotus I, who was Bishop of Constantinople from 815 to 821. Theodotus presided over the council which reinstated iconoclasm, meaning destroying these icons, repudiating, anathematizing the Second Council of Nicaea, and reaffirming the decisions of the Council of Hieria. So you see, guys, there was a huge council in 754. This was during the first iconoclast crisis. They're calling it a crisis, but it's really just, people opposing some new thing, the idea that you should bow to icons. And then at the Council of Hieria, they had a lot of bishops there. There were more bishops at the Council of Hieria than there were at the Second Council of Nicaea, which they consider an ecumenical council. Tell me, guys, if the whole church had decided that we really were bowing to images, If that really was the whole church deciding it, how is it that there were more bishops at the Council of Hieria than there were at the Second Council of Nicaea? By the way, guys, at the time of the Bishop of Hieria, which was just a few years before the Second Council of Nicaea, the patriarchs, 4 of the 5 patriarchs, Bishop of Antioch, Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, all 4 of them were iconoclasts. They all opposed bowing to images and wrote books against it. And the Bishop of Rome at the time did endorse it. But the other 4 were against it. And
Wait, when exactly did they say that the icon veneration thing came?
787 is when they said, we are going to do it. And it was made, this idea of bowing down to the images and actually requiring it as a law, or else you will actually be tortured. Did you know that this empress who made this law, who convened the so-called Seventh Ecumenical Council, which is also called the Second Council of Nicaea, this empress, she was insane, guys. She killed her own son, murdered him, gouged out his eyes, because she was trying to take his place. She wouldn't let her son be emperor. She wanted to be in charge of the kingdom. And she staged this coup where she actually had her son killed so that she could reign in his stead, even though he's the rightful emperor. She even got a letter from the Bishop of Rome saying, Irene, you can't be an emperor. She actually was she was a dyke. She was a lesbian. She was like, I want to be a man. I'm going to call myself emperor. And people were saying, how can a woman call herself emperor? That's not a female title. That's a male title. She's like, no. I'm an emperor, and I'm going to be in charge of the kingdom, even though she can't be an emperor. Her son had become of age. He was an adult. It was time for her to step aside. She was only acting as a regent, meaning like a kind of a stand-in for a while until her son became an adult. But he was an adult, and rightfully by law, her son's supposed to come in and be emperor. But she had him executed. And she said, no, I'm the emperor. She called herself that. And of course, her own officials and her own kingdom rose against her and, took the kingdom back from her. And all the people that conspired with her, they were all gotten rid of. They banished her to the island of Lesbos, which is where we get the word lesbian. So they got rid of her, and yeah, that was the insane woman. I mean, we've talked about that in other calls. Guys, when they say ecumenical council, they just mean, at one time in history, there was a council that endorsed this stuff, and there was massive controversy about bowing to images, guys. This wasn't something that the church just said, oh yeah, let's do it, we've always been doing it. Nothing of the sort. A huge council of Hieria, was convened, which had more bishops present at it than the Second Council of Nicaea, and they completely condemned it and said, you're accursed if you bow to images. And then guys, in Constantinople itself, the Bishop of Constantinople and the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire in 815, this is 1 year after this period here, they said, the Second Council of Nicaea was a joke. They said nobody takes that seriously, and they said that's a curse. That insane empress and that ridiculous so-called Bishop of Constantinople, who she had ordained, from the class of laity all the way to a bishop in one day, which is against all church canons. It's impossible. They say that's completely fake. And then you had other councils, Council of Paris, Council of Frankfurt, more huge councils in Europe saying, that stuff that they were doing down there in Turkey, with the Council of Nicaea, that was crazy. And they all anathematized it. The vast majority of the church said that was utter insanity to say you're even allowed to bow down to images, let alone that you're required to. So back to this guy who says he says you're rejecting all the councils. What does he mean, all the councils? He's the one who chose arbitrarily the Second Council of Nicaea by that insane, murderous maniac, Irene, her child murderer. He's the one who chose that one. That's a real one. God was there. I mean, what a blasphemous thing. But he says the Holy Spirit was there leading her to do that, and to threaten the sitting patriarch of Constantinople, to threaten him. By the way, guys, did you know at the time of the Second Council of Nicaea, the sitting bishop of Constantinople was an iconoclast. He was completely opposed to icon veneration, bowing to images. He had written extensively against it. And so she showed up to him and threatened him and got him to step down. She basically just said, Are you going to do it or not? Are you going to endorse it or not? And he declined. And so she went, well, I mean, he didn't end up serving as her bishop, but I mean, he was terrified. He was a weakling and a coward. He wasn't a real bishop. He's just another fake bishop, another guy just chosen by an emperor to be a bishop. So he didn't go along with what she said. She chose a different bishop to preside over the so-called Second Council of Nicaea. And he was the only patriarch there, guys. The bishops of Alexandria and Antioch and Rome and Jerusalem did not show up at the Second Council of Nicaea. It was just this one guy, this totally fake bishop named Tarasios, and he presided over this fake Second Council of Nicaea. This is just an example of their ridiculous, corrupt councils, which everyone in their right mind would reject. And if any of these people want to debate us, we'll debate them someday. We'll ask them how great they think this woman is, this Empress Irene. We'll ask them how valid they think the ordination of her imperial secretary was to replace the sitting bishop of Constantinople, who was an iconoclast. We'll ask him, what do you think about it? Does this concern you a little bit? Imagine if the first council of Nicaea had been like that. Imagine, guys, if Constantine himself was, imagine if the sitting bishop over the Council of Nicaea had been a guy who previously, even like up to a few days prior, had adamantly denied the divinity of Jesus. Imagine that. And then, after being threatened by the emperor, he shows up and he says, actually, Jesus is divine. Would you say, like, yeah, this is an ecumenical council. Finally, the church is getting together and declaring the truth. The whole church is agreeing. You'd say, oh, that's kind of disconcerting. How can I trust this guy if he was just yesterday writing books against Jesus' divinity? But guys, that's exactly what happened at the Second Council of Nicaea. The sitting bishop of Constantinople had not only opposed bowing to images, but had written books against it. And then Irene went and threatened him. And then she said, you're not going to be the bishop anymore. And she got another guy, said, you're bishop, let's do the Second Council of Nicaea. You're anathema if you don't bow down to the images. And none of the other four patriarchs were even present at it, guys. What a joke. There's so much more to say about it. But this guy is ignorant. They're all ignorant, and they would wish that you stay ignorant too. And imagine that these councils are like these very official and righteous gatherings. They're actually just dens of thieves and murderers. Yes, we reject the councils, just like Gregory of Nazianzus said. Right on, Gregory. He says, yet you seem to accept certain aspects of the councils, such as the doctrine of Scripture, affirmed at the Council of Carthage, but reject other matters that don't pertain to apostolic writings. Aaron, I got a question for you if you're there. Aaron, do you accept certain aspects of the council, such as the Council of Carthage?
Hey Luke,
I'm.
real quick while he's typing.
What was that?
Real quick while he's typing. Well, what does patriarch mean again? Doesn't that mean like a father, a forefather?
Yes, but they would refer to a big bishop, a bishop over one of the main 5 cities, which were Jerusalem, Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople. They would refer to them as a patriarch because they were over some of the biggest cities, and not only over a city, but a huge, vast region of land, sometimes multiple nations. The bishop of Jerusalem was over the entire nation of Israel. So a patriarch is a big bishop with huge authority, and he's over many other bishops who all answer to him.
So that's just like one meaning of patriarch, or that's the only?
That's just
definition?
the church meaning.
Oh, okay. Because like when I heard you were talking about like the 800s, and I thought patriarch was referring to some type of Christian forefather, and I was like, but they couldn't have been Christian bishops if they were like in the 1800s, or not 1800s, the 800s.
Say that one more time, Isaiah.
The whole thing, or just the last part?
I guess just the last part.
Oh no, and I was saying like there's no way there could have been real Christian bishops if it's in the 800s, because after the Council of Nicaea, we lost our apostolic succession.
Yes, we know that. And it's not that there was just a bunch of ordinations going on that day on 325 AD, that all that was going crazy with a bunch of ordinations. But in the following years, in the next 40 years, all the ordinations were corrupted.
Mm.
Yes. Well, I was asking you facetiously, Aaron, when I was saying, do you accept the Council of Carthage? Who cares about the Council of Carthage? We say that we reject these councils. And even if a council, even if any of these councils does affirm something true, well, we can recognize the truth of it in the traditions of the church which existed prior to it. We don't need the council to recognize what the church already knew. But no, we don't have a canon of scripture because that's not something that the church ever had for the first 3 centuries. Yes, he says, but you reject other matters that don't pertain to apostolic writings. I'm not sure what he means by that. Finally, he says, another straw man you present is the argument that the church did bad things in history, so it can't have apostolic succession. You know, this guy's always using these terms like straw man. That's not a steel man of our argument. That's not really representing our argument as strong as it is. We didn't just say bad things happened in history, so the church lost apostolic succession. We have the church from the year 325 all the way to like 370 saying that apostolic succession was completely destroyed. And they know that. They know that heretics took over the entire church. That there was a tiny handful of Orthodox bishops who refused to buckle under the pressure of the government forcing them to subscribe to a false doctrine. And those few bishops that refused to buckle, like Athanasius and Hilary of Poitiers, they were banished. They were kicked out, and their churches were taken over by false bishops. And then they say that those false bishops have the power to ordain other bishops validly. And they derive their so-called apostolic succession from a line of multiple false bishops that even they would say are heretics. Now, guys, remember these questions when dealing with the Cathodox. Ask them these questions. Here, I even started writing
Oh,
some.
so it wasn't like all the bishops were like joining with the government. It was that the government was replacing these bishops if they wouldn't join them.
Oh no, make no mistake, they were joining with the government. That was the main.
Some of them.
Oh, all of them. The vast majority of them were joining with the government. The vast majority of them were denying the divinity of Christ. That was the controversy after Nicaea. The vast majority of bishops decided to reverse on the Council of Nicaea and say that Jesus is not the literal Son of God, that he's a creation of God, and that there was a time when he didn't exist, and that he popped out of thin air, out of nothing. That's what the vast majority of them said. And the ones who fought with the emperor, they were killed. And then new bishops who were appointed from the emperor's court, they were eunuchs and dukes. They were counts. These counts and eunuchs. I didn't mean to say duke. I meant counts and eunuchs. Those are the two classes. They were appointed to be replacements for the bishops who were martyred. Yeah, that's what
And
happened. Yes, Isaiah.
so I was just thinking about this now, and I was thinking, I'm like, why would bishops, get involved with the government? I'm not too learned on like the Council of Nicaea, but I know like they were the council was called by Constantine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like, why would they be mixing the religion with the government? And I know you said that like some people they stood on business and they got exiled to islands, they got martyred. Were those men, were they present at the council, or were they just like found out to be holding to true doctrine after the council was convened?
I think you might be a little confused, Isaiah. The exiling of bishops happened after the Council of Nicaea, the first Council of Nicaea.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I'm like, if there was authentic, because I know Christianity got legalized in 313, and then things got worse in 325 with the Council of Nicaea. But if we had authentic bishops,
Yes.
how many of those bishops attended the council? And even if they did hold to true doctrine concerning the divinity of Christ, were they could they still even be a true bishop because they got involved with the government? in
No.
the first place.
They couldn't.
Okay.
Well, getting involved with the government doesn't immediately invalidate your ordination, but being chosen, handpicked by an emperor to be ordained as a bishop, that does destroy your ordination. Just saying hi to the emperor, or talking to the emperor, you'd still receive. You'd still have to actually do something bad enough to warrant either your deposition by other bishops or just to fall away from the faith, for it to be obvious that you're not a Christian anymore in the eyes of everyone looking at you. But yeah, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much worse than that, more than them just being corrupt as bishops. We're saying the actual ordinations which took place after the existing bishops were exiled or killed. Those ordinations were false. The ones where they replaced existing bishops, righteous bishops, legit bishops.
No, yeah, they were appointing their own bishops in the church, telling them that they have the authority to do ordinations. I understand all that, but I'm like, yeah, and I know like, it's not you literally can't talk to the government or whatever, but if the council was called by Constantine, wouldn't you showing up be like getting involved in the government
Oh,
in a way
certainly. Oh, yes.
okay.
You should never do it. Well, you're already sinning by doing that. Paul makes it very
Okay.
clear. He commands you are not to ever have a tribunal, a court case. You're not allowed to go to law against your brother to a heathen judge. And that's exactly what the bishops did. Eusebius and some of the other historians, like Theodoret and Sosman and Socrates and Athanasius, say that when they all showed up at the court, at this huge cathedral, to talk about Arianism in front of Constantine, many of the bishops had actually written letters to Constantine asking him to punish other bishops, to exile them for having false doctrine. And the historians say that Constantine took this big stack of letters and burned them right in front of everybody. And he said, "You guys are acting really immature, asking me to come punish these people." He says, "I want you guys to resolve this." Constantine was actually acting the most mature out of anybody at that council.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering because I'm like, you know, if someone was at the council and they was saying that Christ is divine, they was refuting Arianism, they were on the right side doctrine wise, then that's cool. And I know some of them they got exiled, martyred after the council, for those reasons. But I'm like, even with that, how could they be a valid bishop if getting involved with the government we're not supposed to do that in the first place? And like, who are those people who went there? So like, that's what I was wondering.
They were
That
worthy. They were worthy of reprimand, and they were bringing a great evil upon themselves. But God simply allowed a punishment to happen to them naturally. God let them reap what they sowed, because when they invited that emperor, hoping that they would secure peace, not just in the empire, but in the church, that through the empire's government power and oversight, they would establish the orthodox truth in all the churches, they reaped what they sowed, and the government did get involved, and they did require that certain doctrines be adhered to, but it ended up being false doctrine, and they realized this was a terrible idea, letting the emperor be involved. So many of them did repent, and I think we should give them credit, Isaiah, for repenting. Athanasius did repent of it, and the other bishops like Hosius, who was the president over the Council of Nicaea, he was the chief bishop that they chose to be their president. He also repented of it, and he later wrote to the emperor and said, "You have no business in church affairs. The government should not mix with the church."
But
So
what happened to them after that? After
Athanasius,
after they repented.
Athanasius
Yeah.
and Hosius were both exiled.
so so,
Oh,
so
okay.
after they reverted, they were exiled, so they can't really do anything about it.
Right. They were replaced. Athanasius was replaced with a different bishop.
And these bishops they were replaced with, they conformed with the government.
Of course, they were actually people who were in the emperor's court. They were his officials. They weren't even Christians.
Oh, see.
Yeah, back then it was becoming culturally acceptable just to be a Christian, call yourself a Christian, even if you really have nothing to do with Christianity. And they'd receive
So you,
baptisms, but they wouldn't be real Christians.
so that's how apostolic succession got destroyed then.
Yes, it was not only corrupted ordinations, but it was the church becoming totally lax and getting a little too jubilant and rejoicing too much at the idea of their religion being legalized. And they allowed people to be in the church who never should have been allowed in the church.
And they
Yeah.
took over and corrupted it.
Yes. Okay, now Aaron, I'd like to read
Wait,
your
wait.
response. Yes, go ahead, Isaiah.
Sorry, real quick. So just it's like similar question, but just get clarification. So now that I know all that, someone, let's say like Athanasius, for example, he was preaching the right doctrine concerning Christ's divinity, but he was in sin for showing up to the council, which we're not supposed to get involved with the government like that at all as Christians, especially as a bishop. He was a bishop, right?
Athanasius was not even a bishop at the time. He was a deacon. And it was
Oh,
probably unwise to let him, as a deacon, do all that talking at the Council of Nicaea.
oh, okay.
But
Well,
his
let's say that.
bishop, yes, his bishop let him do it. His bishop was impressed at how learned and how knowledgeable Athanasius was, so he let his own deacon do talking.
Wow. Well, let's say that it was a bishop, like they'd be in sin for showing up to that council, even if they were preaching the right doctrine. Would we still call them an authentic bishop after that? Like, if they repented, then yeah, but if they didn't repent, then we'd be like, okay, that's not an authentic bishop.
Yeah, they didn't do anything to cause them to be immediately discounted as a Christian at all. They were just in major sin, and either depositions were in order or punishment, and God chose punishment. When he saw that so many bishops were allowing the government to interfere in the church and corrupt it, God let them go ahead and taste their own medicine. Because they were wanting the heretics to be punished. They were wanting Arius and other heretics to be punished for having false doctrine. And they were having the government inflict these punishments. And then the government did
Yeah.
it to them. So they got what they deserved. And it was a kindness from God to let them learn their own lesson, learn their lesson, taste their own medicine that way. They realized, wow,
Yeah.
we should not have the government involved. And they repented of it. At least we know Athanasius and Hosius did. And there are more writings. We'd love to read more of those writings when we have the time, but we know the chief speakers in church history, Hosius and Athanasius, did repent.
Just the two of those?
All right. Thank you, Luke.
Well, Rahim, certainly others denounced the government being involved, but I don't know how much guys like Hilary of Poitiers, were actually involved in the government prior to that.
Mm. And if anyone like they oppose that they were replaced, and if they repented, they would when they were like exiled, that's when they would be deposed as bishops, right?
Well, the government would make it sound like, oh, you're not a bishop anymore. But in reality, they weren't really deposed. Just because the government exiles you doesn't mean you're not a bishop anymore. So they were still the sitting bishops. Athanasius was still the sitting bishop of Alexandria. He just wasn't in Alexandria. All right, Aaron, let me read your comment that you had here. You were writing it out, and I want to clarify. When I was asking you to answer about Council of Carthage, we don't care about those councils, guys. If anybody says they're like you're deriving what you're saying from the Council of Carthage, I mean, you should just say to them, I don't even know what that is, man. I don't care. I don't have enough time to read all the post-Nicene stuff when I haven't even read the pre-Nicene completely. I'm a student of the early church fathers. You're a student of the Orthodox, the Soviet Russian Orthodox Church or something like that. And I just don't really have anything to do with that. I don't serve under billionaire fake bishops. I serve under real bishops. They're my teachers. See to that yourself. Okay, let me finish the comment, and then, Aaron, I'll read your response. So he says, another straw man you present is the argument that the church did bad things in history, so it can't have apostolic succession. Wow, what just unserious type of speaking. He really needs to go look into history. And we should always ask these people, hey, what kind of evidence do you need for me to prove apostolic succession was broken? See, the problem is a lot of these people will say, well, actually, I don't believe it's possible to break apostolic succession, even if they're all heretics, ordaining other people, even if it's an excommunicated person who is ordaining other people. I think I think his ordinations are all valid. Guys, if that's what they're going to say, if that's what the Cathodox
Oh,
are going to say, then you just can't even deal with that person. They don't believe apostolic succession can be broken. If you were to ask them, all right, you're telling me I haven't provided enough evidence to prove apostolic succession was broken. Well, what kind of evidence do I have to present? If they can't give you an answer, then they're admitting they're not honest. And
wait, an exiled bishop can't ordain people? Like, can't do no more ordinations?
I think you're confused, Raheem. I wasn't saying that. An exiled bishop can ordain other people. I'm not talking about an excommunicated bishop. I'm talking about an evil bishop who's excommunicated because he's evil. I'm saying, can that guy ordain other bishops? And the Orthodox would say yes. They would say a heretical, evil, excommunicated bishop still has the power to ordain other bishops, which is absurd. The church says that's impossible. If he's not even a Christian, he's not a bishop. And if he's not a bishop, he certainly can't ordain anybody else as a bishop. How can he bestow what he doesn't possess? You understand now?
I'm trying to. No, not really.
I think you're mixed up between me talking about Athanasius, a legitimate bishop who was excommunicated by, I wouldn't even call him excommunicated. I'd just say he's exiled. I would never call him excommunicated. It's true that the bishops will say, you're not in the church anymore, but they're fake bishops. They can't determine whether he's in the church or not.
Hey, Luke.
Yes, Brian, are you following?
Am I what?
Are you following everything I'm saying so far?
No, yeah, I've been listening. I thought my mic wasn't working because I tried speaking a bit ago or a few times, but it just wasn't working, I guess.
You're fine.
But so, I just want to not remind, but just say again what I said like a while ago in a call. I think it was with you and Nolan, but that the Catholics and Orthodox, I think more Catholics will say, what do they say again? They'll say to study church history is to cease to be a Protestant, or to cease to be a Protestant, or to cease to be non-Catholic.
Yes.
Basically, trying to say be a Roman Catholic if you do so. But then it's like you're providing all this information, right, about history, about all this history with the bishops and the emperors and the apostolic succession being destroyed and everything. And I can't help but to think that what the Cathodox or what they say, it can be pointed back right at them. To study history is to cease to be an Orthodox, a fake Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, whatever, and to cease to be a Roman Catholic and be a true Catholic, and then you'll actually be a true Catholic or a true Orthodox Christian. So it's like what they say can be flipped right back around and pointed right back at them. So it's just ironic that they say this to people who are ignorant, but then when someone's not ignorant, they'll see right through their nonsense.
Yes, I concur. They've stolen all these words and adopted them as if they belong to these people, but they don't belong to them. They are not Catholic. They are not Orthodox. See, Catholic, guys, is when something's universally believed. How can you call it the Catholic faith if your faith is derived from some woman empress who goes and just grabs a bishop? First, she ignores the existing bishop, who we don't recognize that guy, Paul IV, as a real bishop of Constantinople. But nevertheless, what they would consider a real bishop, she disregards and says, I'm going to get a new bishop. I'm just going to have this one patriarch out of the 5 be present at this fake council, and we're going to declare something as if it was the church's doctrine and ignore everything that the church has always taught. And they say, yeah, that's Catholic. That's the Catholic faith. That's the Orthodox faith. Is that not absurd? I mean, we could show them the actual Orthodox Church, the actual Catholic Church, and what they say, and they would disregard that. They said, no. We got Empress Irene, the murderer. We need her to define Christianity for us, and she defines orthodoxy. I mean, you can't make up anything more silly than that. Yes, exactly. We own these terms. We are the ones who would say, no, you get into history. You're the ones who don't know history, and you're the ones who suppress history, you Cathodox. We know history. We've gotten into it. We know it better than you do. And the more you learn about history, the more you see that Christ's words were fulfilled. We're going to read a few more quotes here. There's some blasphemy in these comments, making it sound as if, well, if Christ's church falls away, then that means, well, we're going to see it. We'll read it in just a second. Some real blasphemy in these comments. People need to watch what they say.
Wait, Luke, do both the Catholic and the Orthodox, they both appeal to Empress Irene?
Yes.
Is it just for idol worship? Because I didn't join from the beginning.
Yes, they say that Second Council of Nicaea was inspired by the Holy Spirit. They say the Holy Spirit caused Irene to convene that council. They venerate her. They love Irene. They say she's a hero. They say that to women in the Orthodox Church. Yeah, this woman who killed her son, he's a hero. It must be really awkward for the kids standing there next to their mothers when they hear
I
that
know.
said. When I was a kid, I was afraid of getting a spanking. Kids in the Orthodox and Catholic Church, they should be afraid of getting their eyes gouged out by their mother, because they say that's a hero, that's a real model to you Christian women. You should see how much they love Empress Irene, the murderer of her own child. By the way, she was a prostitute. Guys, I can't even make this stuff up. It's so
What?
completely absurd. She was a prostitute, a royal prostitute. She was a courtesan of the court of the what do you call it? The emperor. She was a courtesan,
Courtesan.
a prostitute,
What?
especially one with wealthy and upper class clients. That's what they call her. Guys, sometimes they use words like that, like, oh, a courtesan. Don't call her a prostitute. That's inflammatory. But no, she was just a prostitute, and then she was a very clever prostitute, and she eventually ascended the ranks using her skills, and then she became empress, and then she wanted to become emperor. Here, let me show you.
That is crazy.
Let me just show you, though. There she is.
I don't know if I was here for this part. I remember you said that she was a dyke. She wanted to be emperor, even though her son was like old enough, and then he was supposed to be the emperor.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
she put her face on the coins next to his. She's competing with him. And then eventually she just commanded that her face be on it. Whenever she'd send out her royal decrees, it'd just have her signature on there. Empress Irene says. And then she said, "Oh,
That's insane,
son's getting
though.
too old." She said, "It's getting a little too old. We got to get rid of the son."
Imagine affirming your doctrine off of a woman who's a murderer who killed her own son, more specifically, and it's a novel. Like it's not ancient or universal. Like there's just so much stacked up against them. A murderous woman prostitute, and it's not ancient or universal. That's like 5 things, I think.
Yes, guys. Do you understand? If you were to get into history, you would see something that's so outrageous, so evil, so despicable. We have murder, and not just any kind of murder, but murder of children, and murder from a woman, and not just any kind of woman, but a prostitute, and not just any kind of prostitute, but a prostitute who wants to be emperor of the world. And we call this an ecumenical council when a murderous, homosexual, dyke, lesbian, prostitute, murderer wants to rule the world and command that everybody bow to the images or be accursed. And we're like, yeah. I mean, guys, I can't even say it. But I mean, they would actually say, that's the Holy Spirit.
They're
No,
insane.
guys, God has made it so clear. He's made it so crystal clear that the church had fallen away that you have to be a dishonest and evil person to say such a blasphemous thing, that the Holy Spirit was behind that. There was a spirit behind it, but it wasn't the Holy Spirit.
Hmm. How you find this stuff out? You just like research into it.
Guys,
Talk about
I learned this from Orthodox websites. They talk about it.
wow.
You should go on. You should read them like praising her, talking about how wonderful Irene is, and how inspiring she is, and that Orthodox women should be inspired by Irene. They say,
Oh, Emperor Irene.
because they
The
say,
greatest.
they're like, she's an example of, being a Christian in the face of persecution. They say, because they're like, her husband didn't support it. She had to hide an icon from her husband, and that when her husband found out that she had icons, he refused to have her anymore, to sleep with her. He said, "Nah." He's like, "What is wrong with you?" And they're like, "Wow, she's so strong under persecution." Okay, let's read the last part of this comment. This really convincing comment. So he says, you can't just say the church did bad things so it can't have apostolic succession. This is a weak point. To reiterate, claiming that any change in doctrine over time is heretical is unreasonable. You see how the guys, they don't hesitate to admit that they are changing doctrines over time. Like any change in doctrine. I love how harmless you make it sound. Just any change. Like, I can't believe, man, that you let something so small slide. Like, legalizing Christians going to war, divorce and remarriage. Just bowing down to images. Idolatry. I can't believe, like, just any change in doctrine is such a big deal, man. You mean like changing the most fundamental doctrines of the faith? That's just any teeny little change to you? Like, man, I can't believe you think apostolic succession was destroyed. Anyway, we have a brand new system for ordaining bishops. The emperor has to choose you to be bishop. Can't believe you think any change is like such a big deal. Anyway, Mary's your mommy, and you need to pray to her, and you need to ask her for salvation and forgiveness of your sins. You need to bow down and kiss her image. And if you don't, you're cursed. You're not a Christian. You're outside of the church. Can't believe you think just any little change is such a big deal. Get over it, man. Did you know that marriage is a sacrament now? Did you know that if you're not married by an Orthodox priest, then you're just fornicating right now? Even if you know, righteously asked her father for permission to marry her and you kept yourself a virgin your whole life and you entered into holy matrimony with her, if you didn't have a priest present, then you're just fornicating with her. And forget history, forget all the people who lived for thousands of years and had marriages, forget all the church and all the church history where nobody considered it a sacrament, just completely forget that. Listen, we're telling you now, after like the 1100s or 1200s, we're telling you it's a sacrament now, and you have to accept that. And also, did you know that you can have multiple marriages, and as long as your marriages are all performed by a priest of Satan, then did you know that that's not adultery? I can't believe, man, that you just think any change of doctrine over time is heretical. That's just unreasonable. Just unreasonable. He says, do you not think doctrine developed over time? From the period of the Ante-Nicene Fathers to the post-Nicene Fathers, and later to the Cappadocian Fathers? Dismissing this development is in itself heretical. Well, buddy, we don't deny that there was development after Nicaea. Nobody's denying that. But there wasn't development for the first 3 centuries. And nobody in the first 3 centuries would say, yeah, we're developing it over time. Guys, even after Nicaea, they wouldn't dare say such a thing because they knew how contrary that was to the whole church's teaching, that they were simply preserving the dogmas that were passed down to them. Do you guys know, even at the Second Council of Nicaea, did you guys know, at the Seventh Ecumenical Council, which Irene and her fake bishop Teresios presided over, did you know that they claimed they were not developing or changing any doctrine in the church? They said this is what the church has always believed for all time. And did you know at the Second Council of Nicaea, this fake, ridiculous, absurd council, did you know that they brought forward quotes that were completely fake? They were quoting ante-Nicene church fathers like Ignatius. They were bringing forward fake quotes from Justin Martyr and post-Nicene church fathers like Basil the Great. And they're saying, look at these quotes. They're saying we should bow down to images. And guys, they were so stupid. They didn't realize these were completely forged quotes. They were completely fake quotes. And the Orthodox and Catholics even admit it today. They say, yeah, we know those are completely fake. They were mistaken. They were a little bit mistaken using completely fake quotes. And they said, but listen, the Holy Spirit was still leading them to do it because those quotes aren't what give validity to the council.
Hey, Luke, I have a question regarding that. Um, are these fake quotes? Are they found on the website on New Advent? If you look at the Second Council of Nicaea, like, do they have the quotes there, like or the
Un-
fake quote from Justin or whatever?
No, they have a couple in there, but they skip stuff. On New Advent, guys, and on a lot of these websites, they don't actually give you the full transcript of what happened at the council. They give you an abbreviated version. And even I haven't been able to read the full transcript. I've only read that lame abbreviated one. But occasionally online, I'll hear them mention, oh, and they brought this quote and that quote, and we know that these are fake quotes. And the reason why they don't show them, guys, the reason why they don't show them on New Advent is because they know somebody's going to call them out and say these are completely fake quotes. But it's well known they were brought up in the course of the council. But nowadays, if you just go on the website, they have a little brief thing that just says, various church fathers are quoted here, and then they say, and then the next part, they kind of just skip over it.
That's like acknowledging it, but just not showing it.
Yes. So, guys, you have the Orthodox and Catholics on the one hand saying, don't you think doctrine can develop over time? And yet at these ecumenical councils, they are not claiming to be developing doctrine at all. And guys, at Nicaea, they never claimed to be developing doctrine about Christ's divinity. Nobody at the first council of Nicaea, with Constantine present, did any bishop say, this has just been a very difficult question for a long time, and we just haven't been able to figure it out. And so today, let's all just figure it out. Instead, guys, you had two camps. You had one camp saying, this is ridiculous. What are we doing here? Everybody already knows that Jesus is divine. And then you had another, and they would say, listen, the fathers have already said it. And, Athanasius was up there, bringing up lots of quotes from the early church fathers saying, the church has always believed in this doctrine of Christ's divinity and his literal begotten nature, his begotten sonship. And then you have another camp saying, oh no, we're Arians, and we believe that the church has always taught something different, that Christ is not a literal son. But neither side said, oh, well, we needed time to develop this. And guys, one party was correct and the other one was wrong. The Arians were wrong, and Athanasius and the others, the other half, were correct.
How did the Arians, if they made that claim, did they provide any evidence for it or no?
Yes, they did bring forward various quotes. They even brought forward quotes from Origen. They tried to say Origen was denying that Jesus was divine. And then Athanasius said, you guys are quoting Origen out of context. He says, let me show you what Origen really says. And then he showed it, and then that was that.
That's in the Council of Nicaea transcript?
Yes, it's in Athanasius' writings, in his book, The Decrees. I think it's called Decretus.
What is that book about?
Athanasius is just telling you what the summary, what the conclusion of the Council of Nicaea was. He just explains everything they discussed.
Oh, maybe a good book to read. I don't know.
Yes. So, guys, if anybody says, don't you know doctrines develop over time? The response is, tell me where in any of your councils they say that. Show me a council that says, we are developing doctrine over time. That's not what the councils say. It's not what the post-Nicene church fathers say within, the first, 300s, 400s. I haven't really read beyond 400s, guys. We've read a little bit of 400s and 500s. We've read a little bit of Gregory the Great and Caesarius and others. But, we're trying to focus on becoming experts of the early church. But from what we've read, nobody claims that they just have the power to develop doctrine over time. Vincent of Lerins in the 400s, he says, we may never add anything to a doctrine. We cannot change it. The only thing we can do is provide more proofs for the existing doctrines. We can explain the same doctrine in a different way or provide more analogies or proofs for it, but we cannot change the doctrine. We cannot correct something that the church universally believed. That's impossible. We can't even slightly change it. But the Orthodox and Catholics say, oh no, we need a reverse on some things. We need to do a complete about-face. Okay, he continues. He says, oh, was that everything? Do you not think doctrine developed over time? From the period of the Ante-Nicene fathers to the post-Nicene fathers, and later to the Cappadocian fathers? That would just be like John Chrysostom and Basil and Gregory of Nazianzus. He says, dismissing this development is, in itself, heretical. What does that even mean? What a bizarre thing to say. This guy's just pretending to be all high and mighty. It's really weak. We can see multiple examples of doctrinal evolution during the apostolic age. For instance, the apostolic fathers did not understand the Trinity in the same way that we do today. I could quote the fathers to support this, but I'm running out of space. Well, this is what they always turn to, guys. We told you. They will sooner call the Ante-Nicene church fathers, even the ones living closest to the apostles, they will call them heretics before they ever admit that they are heretics. But the apostolic fathers don't say anything heretical. They've got a personal problem. All right, let's read Aaron's response here. I'll reload in case you've edited it at all, Aaron.
If you're a Christian like me,
We are. All right. Aaron, is he still there? It's probably really late for you, isn't it, Aaron? Yeah. Okay. You said
Wait, what's going on?
Aaron made a response, and I'm gonna read his response. Who was that?
Oh, I asked what's going on.
Oh, we're just responding to some comments that are on Aaron's video.
Aaron made a video.
Yes, he did.
What's it about? Can you send it?
Sure. It's right here in the chat.
Hey Lou, real quick, I mean to leave earlier while you're still talking to me about Irene and stuff, but I had to do something real quick, so that's my fault.
That's okay. Did you need to say anything else, or do you have to head out?
No, I'm back now. It was quick.
That's all
But
right.
I had to, yeah.
Okay, Aaron, I'm going to read your comment and see. You said, number one, Patriarch, the head, the literal head of the Russian Orthodox Church, is corrupt. If you do not agree with him, then why have no other patriarchs denounced him or excommunicated him from the church? Number two, you said the origin slander is false. Do some proper research instead of reading Wikipedia. Number three, moreover, the claim that icon veneration was condemned in the early church is simply wrong. Debunked here. Yes. Also, you can add one other thing. You can say it's also hypocritical, double standards, because many Orthodox church fathers that they would call Orthodox church fathers are universalists. And you say, above is all the church fathers destroying icon veneration. Then you can again quote him saying, in fact, we have evidence of Christian catacombs and icons of Christ dating as early as the 2nd century. And you responded, this doesn't prove anything. We're discussing the worship of images and icons. Can you please provide any of the early Christians bowing down to these icons? Yes, you should say provide any proof of them bowing down. Exactly. And then with number 5, you said, you used my logic correctly. And then you said, now you are strawmanning. Everything that I agree with, such as the Nicene Creed, was established by the early pre-Nicene Christians, long before the Council of Nicaea. And you said, another straw man he says, another straw man you present is the argument that the church did bad things in history, so it can't have apostolic succession. And then you can say, apostolic succession consists of two things, having a legitimate ordination from other bishops and preserving the teachings of the apostles. The Cathodox have lost both of these things. Their heresies about marriage, war, divorce, and remarriage, and worshipping images would put them out of the church even if they were duly ordained, but they don't even have apostolic succession in that respect either. Starting after the Council of Nicaea, both Constantine and his son started choosing bishops to preside over the church. Before this, the church had explicitly forbidden Christians from holding government office. They also taught that if any Christian made use of the government to obtain ordination as a bishop, the ordination was invalid. For this reason, practically all ordinations after the Council of Nicaea were invalid, because Constantine and his own son Constantius selected the men who were to be ordained as bishops. If an emperor really did have authority to appoint bishops, then that would make emperors part of the clergy, and the most powerful class. But the church taught explicitly that if anyone wants to become a catechumen, someone who learns about the faith in preparation for baptism, they have to give up government office first. Starting with Athanasius, the post-Nicene bishops recognized that apostolic succession was destroyed by the false bishops being set up by the emperors. To quote you, I could quote the fathers to support this, but I'm running out of space. So true, Aaron. That's a good response. But you're going to get a lot more comments, and you're not going to have the energy to respond to so many people.
Don't waste all your energy to respond to all the people. It can be really time consuming. doing that. And draining.
It's true. You can actually get depressed. You can actually start to feel angry because you feel powerless. You wonder, what can you do to help these people? And there's just not much you can do. Aaron, we'll put out this information much more. We will crush the evil narratives that they've been able to push on these poor kids. These are just kids commenting. They don't know anything. They just have the same old arguments. We can read some more comments here. Painful comments. He says, icon veneration condemned by the early church? Bro, what? Well, didn't he just admit that? Didn't he admit that some church fathers condemn it? He thinks it's just some, though. Whenever you're talking to them about church fathers, guys, understand that they're calling somebody a church father even if they live in, like, the 1800s. So in his mind, he's like, it's not all the church fathers that condemn it. It's just some. Because he's calling like, everybody. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people church fathers who are not church fathers. He doesn't have the distinction in his mind of pre-Nicene and post-Nicene. He also doesn't see pre-Nicene as having more authority than post-Nicene. He says, oh no, they're of equal authority. Actually, he says post-Nicene is even more authority. And why does he think post-Nicene has more authority? Because he thinks that doctrines had to develop over time. So these people who pretend to have so much respect for the early church and for preserving the traditions, they actually think that the early church was stupid and that they needed to be corrected about a lot of things by the government church, the church that was now going to the war for the emperor and receiving their ordinations and their salaries from the emperor. The Cathodox are telling you, oh no, this is the pure church. This is the wise church. And we're hearing this from bishops who are in the government's pocket. I wonder if there's a conflict of interest there. Not sure if I should respond to all these comments, though, Aaron. And we've all heard this argument. He says, it seems if you're calling for a return to true Christianity, implying that this true Christianity has been lost for some time, he says, this belief is prima facie paradoxical. Why are these kids doing this? Why are they doing this with all these big words? They really do think that this makes them so smart. He says, quoting from Matthew 17:18, I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. It's pretty obvious, no matter how you look at it, that the true church of Jesus Christ has never and will never cease to exist. And as such, it logically follows that the true church is one of the apostolic churches, namely Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, possibly Oriental, and others, but you get the point.
That's so confusing.
It's like,
He
wow.
tells you, yeah, he tells you that he quotes the words of Jesus, but then gives you options. Like, I'm sorry, which church is it? I mean, is it? It can't be three options. There's only one true, obviously. So it's like he quotes the verse and then refutes himself.
I mean, it's a coin flip, 50-50.
There are many questions to ask them. And one of those good questions to ask is, so you think the church is visible, that the visible church always has to exist. Okay, do you believe then it's obvious which one, the Catholic or the Orthodox, is the real church? And if they say, yes, it's obvious, say, how is that supposed to be obvious? I'd love to hear the answer. I've actually never asked anybody that in a debate. I look forward to it. So how's it obvious? And if they say, no, it's not obvious, I'll say, okay, why do you insist then that there is a visible church that is just so obviously the right one? If you admit that it's really difficult to find it, then, how am I supposed to find it? Doesn't that mean I have to go and look at history? But if I look at history, I'm going to find that there's a huge difference between the pre-Nicene church and the post-Nicene. I'm going to find that these two churches are not compatible. They wouldn't have communion with each other. And they always just assume that their interpretation, their invented interpretation of this verse, is the only interpretation. They're acting like a Protestant here. My interpretation is the only one. Well, why don't you go look up what the pre- and post-Nicene church fathers say about this verse? This doctrine that they teach, guys, that this verse here, the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church, that refers to bishops never falling away, that was never taught by the pre-Nicene church. It's not even taught in any of the writings I've read throughout the 300s and 400s. I've yet to hear a single church father make that argument that all the leadership in the church will never fall away and that it's impossible. On the contrary, I do hear all the church fathers saying that this is referring to the church being resurrected. That's what it means for the gates of Hades not to prevail. That all the Christians are going to come alive again because Christ is going to go down to Hades and break the bars, break the gates of Hades, and allow the souls to come out. That's what all the church fathers say, who I've seen. None of them say this other thing. He says, it's pretty obvious no matter how you look at it. Wow, really? That the true church of Jesus Christ has never and will never cease to exist. Well, guys, did we say that the church has ceased to exist? Or did we just say that the leadership has fallen away?
The leadership.
Yeah, we've never said that the church doesn't exist. My goodness, if the church doesn't exist, then we're not even Christians. And nobody can be saved if the church can't exist anymore. He doesn't understand the argument yet, Aaron. He's very confused. He's not even sure what you're saying. To him, it just sounds crazy because he's so badly brainwashed. And there are some people, guys, I want to believe it, I do believe it, that there are some people brainwashed this badly who can come out of this false doctrine and escape the horror of Babylon. But they're going to need a lot of teaching. They're going to need a lot of unbrainwashing. Yes, well, he's right. The Apostolic Church is the true church. He says, namely Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. And, but this guy up here, he says, what did he say? He said, the Apostolic Fathers did not understand the Trinity in the same way that we do today. So one guy down there saying it has to be one of the Apostolic churches, and then this guy saying, the Apostolic Fathers, they just don't even get the Trinity, the most fundamental doctrine of the faith. Wow. So go to an Apostolic church, but don't go to the Apostolic Fathers. Is that right? Am I following? Thank you so much.
But still claim to be the Apostolic Church, even though
yes.
it's stupid. Or claiming to be the early church or like continuation. Yet at the same time, just full of contradiction and hypocrisy.
Yes, and here is a sola scriptura. This guy says, church fathers are helpful and wise, but they, like us, are not divinely inspired. Peter says, his divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. Does that say anything about us never needing to read? I mean, I could just as easily take this to mean if he's saying we just all automatically have knowledge inside of us and we never have to read the church fathers, I could even take that to mean I don't need the Bible. Because apparently God has granted him everything that pertains to knowledge. Excuse me, Protestant, Christopher, Jester, quit jesting. Be serious here. Don't you think the church fathers are knowledge? Don't you think that's one of the things that God has provided for us, that we would have knowledge? Do you think that in the first century that Christians all just had Bibles? Or do you think they had living teachers? Or do you think that all the first Christians all had the apostles? Do you think the apostles were able to just teach everybody personally? Or do you think that they left behind successors to teach people?
And then he adds his own interpretation to it.
Yeah.
Wait,
It's
Luke,
so ironic.
read the first part of his comment.
The early church was wrong all the time. Now, this is a Protestant, guys. This isn't a Cathodox. The early church was wrong all the time. That's why Paul was writing to Corinth. He was correcting their doctrine.
I love that. I love when people say like, "Oh, well, these early churches they weren't unanimous and universal because Paul had to write to them to correct them, blah 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 blah, this, that, and the third." He was correcting them about stuff that they were already like walking in the right way in the first place. That's what he was correcting them about. But then when they were first established, they were walking how they were supposed to walk. And these small handful of churches that Paul wrote to correct on various things, it's nothing compared to like how many churches there actually was. I don't know how many churches there was, but there was a lot of churches. This is just a small handful.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds, guys. The apostles taught in hundreds of cities. To say that, well, Paul wrote a letter to Corinth and Rome and the Galatians, and therefore the whole church was a mess. I mean, what if we actually just put it in perspective, though? That's a tiny percentage of the churches. And by the way, it proves that the church was not a mess because they weren't allowed to just continue teaching false doctrine. They were corrected. And we see throughout the scriptures that if the churches don't submit, then like in 3 John, John will write to him and say, hey, your bishop is going to be replaced. He writes to them and says, Diotrephes is going to go. Demetrius is going to be the new bishop. They were on top of things, guys. They had systems in place where the other churches would come in and they would depose a bishop if it was getting out of hand. And of course,
Yeah, I
that
was just oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say it doesn't stop somebody from making a little sect. There will always be heresies. It says there must be heresies so that those who are proved may be evident. You have to have a choice. That's the definition of heresy. You've got a little choice. You got a little option to choose from. You can go off and be part of the alternate church instead of the universal one. But that doesn't invalidate the one true church just because heresies exist. You will still have the true bishops who are all in unity all around the world, and that existed for 300 years. I don't know why God chose that number 300, but he likes his threes, guys. There is a definite distinguishable period of the church. It is an age of the church, the first 300 years, where they were pure.
Yup. Yeah, when you were saying like in the beginning, I was just thinking that another thing to add to my argument. I'm like, yeah, and on top of all that, Paul was correcting them about these things, but he was correcting them back to like the right doctrine. Like, do you think that he was correcting these? This is not the best way to articulate it, but do you think he was correcting these churches to different doctrines, to different types of faith? Like, nah, he was correcting them all to the same exact one faith. And, that faith the apostles gave to their successors. They preserved it, and then showing them what that faith was. But yeah.
And they think that Christianity comes from just these letters. They imagine that that's the source of Christianity. Paul writing these letters. They don't understand these people are preaching verbally. And these churches had already been established. If Paul's writing a letter to them, it's to correct them about something, not to give them Christianity from scratch. They've got a completely brand new idea of becoming Christians just from reading some letters from Paul.
I don't know, they don't even interpret them right. Like, people love to say, "Oh, Paul said this, Paul said that," but Luke, they don't veil their woman. But you already know that.
They love not veiling their women. It's great. They love it. They got all these women in there. They're running their whorehouse. It's the truth. They
They're
are
prop.
pimps. They're enjoying it. They tell them, when you come in, take off your shoes and socks, they say. Did you know they invented this law? Ridiculous. Never existed in church history. I don't even know when this started. I have not seen it within the first 400 years. But they say, women, when you get in here, take off your shoes and socks. We want to see your feet, your legs. They say
Wait, who does that?
it's in a lot of Orthodox churches, guys.
What? Nah, they're wild. They're freaky.
They do. They do. You guys know just like 200 years ago, like in the 1800s, if a man saw a woman's feet in public, like it was the most scandalous thing ever. They're like, whoa, what is going on? Seeing a woman's foot? Women didn't show their limbs.
Yeah, I remember this one quote from the Veil video. It was saying like something about a modest woman. It was like something, 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 like rare or uncomely, something like that, to see the arm of a chaste woman.
Yes, I remember the quote. This is Clement of Alexandria. He says, further, they ought for the most part to wear shoes, for it is not suitable for the foot to be shown naked. That's what everybody considered. That's what everybody believed even until recent times, guys. I remember watching Little House on the Prairie and seeing that, where it's like, whoa, somebody's going to see a woman's foot. She got an injury, and the doctor's going to see her foot. That wasn't something that people did back then. I heard some account once where some account in that time period of some man who liked to, as a boy, he liked it when it rained, because he says when it would rain, the women would lift up their long dresses, because dresses used to go all the way down to their ankles, but they would lift up their dresses in order so that their dresses wouldn't drag in the water. And when they did that, sometimes they could get a glimpse of their feet.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I know. It's just crazy thinking about, because I remember in the Veil video too, I heard like I don't know if it was the Romans or the Greeks, but like, they was on some immodest timing, some, I don't know if you could say it, if promiscuous is the right word, but like the dude would be talking to her or whatever, and then he would ask for like a glimpse of her ankle or whatever. And I'm just thinking like back then, would like, seeing some part of a woman's body compared to how it is now. Like that stuff is just very normal and commonplace, and I'm like, that we've fallen like mad far.
Yes, we have. All right, well, Aaron, I hope you're satisfied with my response to this guy. There's so much more to say to him. Before we get into debates, I think we should beg these people to just let us establish the doctrines of the faith to them. Let them read Vincent of Lerins. He gives such a great explanation of what orthodoxy is. Or have them read our quotes that we put together from the both pre-Nicene and post-Nicene church fathers, saying nothing can be added to the faith. Nothing. We cannot change anything. We cannot add anything. All we can do is add proofs to what we already believe. It's the only thing we're allowed to do. All we can do is explore the depth of an existing doctrine further. We cannot change it.
What exactly do you mean by explore the depth of it? Because wouldn't it have already been explained in depth by one of
No,
the
I didn't
church
say
fathers?
explained. I mean explored. I suppose explained is true, but I'm saying there's nothing lacking in the existing explanation of the doctrine. It's just that if you have a teaching like baptism, we are to be baptized, and then somebody says, "Did you know that when the earth was flooded, that symbolized baptism? It symbolized the soul. You know, the earth represents the soul. And when the water was sent down and cleaned it of all the wicked people, that symbolized all the vices, all the sins being cleaned off of our soul." Somebody might say, "Oh wow, I didn't know that." And then somebody says, "Did you know that when Noah sends out the dove 3 times, first he sends out the raven, and the raven is a black bird. It represents sin, and it's a bird, so it also represents a spirit because it flies. And did you know that that represents an evil spirit leaving us when we're baptized? Did you know it represents sin leaving us when we're baptized? Did you know when the dove is sent out 3 times and then on the third time it brings an olive branch? Did you know that symbolizes peace being brought to us and that the threefold invocation of the dove represents the Trinity being invoked at our baptism?" Somebody might say, "Wow, that's amazing." See, we're not changing the doctrine, but we're explaining something in more depth. You can explain prophecies about it. You can explain how a single doctrine applies to things in our life, but it's still just the doctrine. It's been defined. You can discuss that doctrine, but the doctrine is the doctrine. Baptism is necessary for salvation. It washes away sins, and after our baptism, we receive the Holy Spirit.
Oh, okay. Because like when you're saying exploring more of it, I thought maybe you meant like a new way to articulate the belief while keeping it the same. But so it could be that, or just explaining something like, oh, Tertullian said this about the symbolism of baptism, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense. That's crazy. We have and do we have post-Nicene authors who the Cathodox they like um hold in respect, I guess you can say, that have those quotes that say like doctrine can't change? I mean, we don't even need that, but it would be even better if they said it.
Yes, there are many. But again, I haven't read a lot of their recent stuff. I've read the early centuries.
Yeah.
I see Brian is writing comments here. Corey, you're writing something. You want to talk about anything, Corey? I'm available if you want to talk about Origin. Nolan said you sent something, but he didn't tell me what, or he didn't show it to me. But you had something about Origin on the Millennium. If you have any documents on that, I'd like to see it.
All right, I'm actually learning how to even use Discord in the first place. Um,
Take your
can you
time.
hear me?
Yes, I would be shocked if I heard that Origin contradicted the other church fathers on it, but I'll
Well,
honestly investigate it. I'd love to see.
a lot of what I've been seeing is he didn't really talk about New Jerusalem in general. like as a general principle, and whenever it was kind of. I would have to go back and find everything I was looking into, but yeah, it's more of like I can't really find a whole lot of him talking about it, but I do see it mentioned by a lot of the other early church fathers.
Oh, certainly.
I forgot. There's a certain term that I found that, and I'd actually gone through it before, but just went back to it. I
A
forgot.
term, is it Chileism?
Oh, yeah, Chiliasm, or however it would be pronounced.
Yeah, it's that
But
Greek letter. It's the I don't know, how do you it's the key. It's the key.
yes,
So
however that is.
neither Chileism nor Chileism are correct. If anybody ever gets angry, if you're like, you say Chalcedon and I say Chalcedon, it's neither of those, just so everybody knows.
Yep. Well, um, but yeah, I just a lot of my I guess prior, like a lot of the things that I look to in life in general are the coming of, say, New Jerusalem. I'm trying not to look towards what's here in my life, like willing to suffer because I'm looking towards what is to come, being some of the promises of Christ. And it's been a really central theme in my general faith and what has driven me to say where I'm at. And uh, so I take it like pretty serious and, uh, but I'm still researching too, and I'm trying not to be. I understand a lot of the things that I don't know as well and what I need to look into, and I'm not trying to wholesale say that Origin taught this on this because, frankly, I've been having a hard time finding a whole lot in general. But I also find that a little bit interesting. And say, whenever you look at the common sense answers that the world might give you, which I'm not saying that those are right, but it it would go to say that he diverged from having a view of us literally reigning on the earth with Christ in New Jerusalem and kind of made it more figurative. Um, that, and I also understand that all things will be made new,
Well, he's
and that the
Origin.
world,
He's always going to talk about the figurative stuff. If you have some
yeah,
quotes, send them to me, Corey. I would like to see them. If you would, I
well,
would appreciate that.
I will do my best. I'm
Because
trying not.
we have a bunch of quotes we're collecting, and Berceau did a pretty good job of it, but we're trying to make a more complete list of quotes on that subject. It's important to us because the Orthodox and Catholics say that the pre-Nicene Church is heretical for believing in a literal thousand-year millennium reign. You know,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The Council of Chalcedon, like 361 or whatever, they actually condemned that as like a heretical belief, but it's something you do find unanimously in the early church.
yes.
Um,
And I'd be really disappointed to hear that Origin contradicted that. And Corey, frankly, I don't believe it. But if you think you have some proof of it, I'd like to see it.
I do have a bunch of quotes that I had found on some website, basically on this type of topic, and you might find it interesting. A lot of it's just going over different quotes, and like from ones from the Epistle of Barnabas, kind of quoting. Is if I was to go and gather quotes on like this topic, is that something you would be interested in?
Yes, of course.
Because yeah, okay,
Yes, I'd love to.
yeah. Well, just to let you know, I don't even have Word on my computer, so I typically am emailing myself documents. I am not a Mennonite, but I kind of act like one now in certain technological ways.
I understand.
But
I
yeah,
also
I'll gather
email
those
stuff.
together. I'd be happy to gather those. And I do want to gather like all the research I can on Origin because, like as you said, I'm not trying to slander anyone. I really do want to avoid things that might cause division in any way. And even though I may have my speculations, I'm not saying I know everything. And frankly, there's a lot of things I don't understand still at the same time. Like I've been looking into this for a while, but I also have had a lot of life things that have sort of gotten my way of really pursuing this with my whole heart. And I haven't really had anyone to pursue it with. So
Well, you have
that's
us now. I hope that you'll never find anybody who takes it more seriously than we do. If you do, then it'll inspire us to take it more seriously. We want to take it the most seriously, as much as we're supposed to. And if we say something about be careful not to slander Origin or something like that, Corey, we're not saying that out of the only reason we would say that, Corey, is for your own sake, because Origen's a real person. If he is what the whole church considered him to be, which was one of the greatest teachers in church history, a righteous man, a virgin his whole life, and a martyr, then he deserves our respect. He's our brother. We can't slander our living brother, and we can't slander our brothers who are in paradise right now. We have to we
I
owe
agree.
them respect. So it's not just some pet peeve or something like don't talk about our favorite guy. It's also just let's speak well of other Christians and not slander them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just know there's also this question I know that would be very beneficial to us as a group, and I know it's something that's not completely like understood just where this falling away really occurred, how it happened, what ideas led to it, what like just all the intricacies of it. Even if Origin was slandered and that slander was used to promote these ideas, if that's the conclusion, then that's the conclusion. And yeah, but I know it needs to get worked out, and uh, I don't know. I just find it really interesting either way. I know that these are some of the really deep questions, the mysteries for kings to go and pursue out. And we are kind of, I've been doing a lot of research all my life, and I've always taken it very serious, and it's kind of put me at odds with a lot of different people. And I can see the same things here. It's different. Anyways, I'm rambling because I'm borderline nervous too. So
That's okay, Corey. Well, I just hope we are a good group. I hope that we're a good family, a good brotherhood. I hope God looks down on us and says, those are my good kids. They're going through the hard times and they're being strong. They don't have
yeah,
mom and dad with them, but they're doing their best. But that's what we
well,
are. We are orphans. Mom has abandoned dad. She's committed adultery. She's become a prostitute. She's killed her husband, really. And and all of our siblings are bad too. I guess it's like a family. It's broken. All the other siblings in the church have turned against each other, and it's chaos. We are orphans. We're fending for ourselves. We're trying to do well, and we need each other.
yeah,
So we want to be good brothers to you, Corey.
yes. I know that you're. I know that we're all trying, and I know that it takes a minute to get used to where I'm coming from and whatnot. And I think, as you're saying there too, it reminds me of Tertullian just talking about how what makes a real Christian is persevering to the end and being willing to get through some of maybe the hard things, because we all kind of do fall and need help in a certain sense. And we are walking on, I think, as I said a little bit before, just like the ancient paths, and not very many people have walked down the road, so we're kind of trying to figure that out.
Yes, it's a very rocky road. It's been neglected, and we've got to go clean it up.
Yeah.
There are people walking it. It's just rare. Look, I went on one of those art websites. I made some art. See, this is that straight and narrow path. Actually, it's more narrow than that. I think. I think it's more like something like it's very narrow. It's something like that. Like you can fall off either side. In
Yeah.
Second Esdras, it says there's water and fire on either side. You can go into one extreme or the other extreme, and you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Yes, gotta
Don't
be
fall
careful.
off the boat.
Well, we want to be extreme in the truth. We want to be uncompromising in the truth. But people tend to have knee-jerk reactions to things, and we don't want to do that. We want to examine the whole thing. And guys, we have to have a spiritual perspective on it too. On something like Origin, Pamphilus of Caesarea wrote a defense of Origin. Have you ever heard of that one, Corey? The defense of Origin.
Yeah, I've been reading. That's one of the ones I've been reading.
Well, he had a statement in there which I agree with. And to some people, it might seem like, oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. That's so extreme. That's like sold out to Origin. Like, come on. But I think it's a most Christian and brotherly and wise and prudent thing to do. But Pamphilus says, since we know that Origen's writings have been corrupted by the heretics, since we know that they targeted his writings in particular because of his great reputation and his eminent position as a teacher of the church, since we know they corrupted Origen's books, we ought to just assume that any statement we find in his writings that contradicts the church's teaching, we ought to assume it's something inserted by heretics. Now that sounds like a really extreme position. It sounds like you're just going to defend everything Origen says now and just deny the possibility of him being a heretic. But you know what, guys? That's a lot safer than accusing him of being a heretic when it took 300 years for him after his death for the church to, well, for some fake bishops to call him a heretic. 300 years. It was in the mid 500s. Origen died in the mid 200s, guys. In the mid 500s, they finally called him a heretic. And before that, he was lauded as one of the greatest.
You can concede though that there's a really deep history to all that happening, and even say Augustine, whenever he was going against Pelagius, Pelagius was trying to basically say that there were issues with Origen. Um, the whole thing of like Eusebius coming out of his school, his Eusebius's like friend or teacher, I forgot his name at this point because there's been a lot of names I've been trying to learn. Was basically a really devout student of Origen, coming from Origen's school. And Eusebius obviously being the one gathering together everyone at the Council of Nicaea and kind of he was one of the first people to really enunciate this whole idea of the millennial reign being something that was truly figurative or almost silly to think of as literal. And Eusebius could be a very devious person, have very devious. I have a really hard time thinking of him as not having some really skeletons in his closet per se. Just based on everything I've seen, but it's not really my place to necessarily call people out or where their hearts are, but I can say whenever they are following doctrines that are obviously wrong and they lead to bad fruit, that fruit being, Christendom, Inc.
Wait,
Uh,
what's wrong with Eusebius?
uh,
What do you do?
if you look at Eusebius, he wrote a couple different, like whenever an emperor was announced as ruler, he would have like a really grand speech that someone would go and present in order to present the emperor. And Eusebius was called up to do it, I think 3 different times. And in it, he kind of compares Constantine to almost like a second Jesus. And whenever it comes into like the millennial reign, he thought of it more as figurative. Like there's this whole idea of we have 2 kingdoms and we are waiting for Christ to return before we're actually ruling and reigning on the earth. And Eusebius thought that more figurative, which allows for Christians to say, go and conquer in the name of Jesus because Jesus is reigning as king on the earth. So why not take dominion over the earth? And this idea takes a lot of different forms throughout history.
Eusebius did endorse war, and he was a close friend of Constantine. And he did
Yeah.
teach a false doctrine about war. He's one of the first ones to do it. He says, well, he says it is true that the church has always taught that we should not be going to war. He says that is true. But he says that there are 2 classes of Christians. There's the Christians who don't go to war, and then there are the ones who kind of just have to. He says, so I don't deny that the church has always taught we shouldn't go to war. He says that is righteous. That's the higher road, but sometimes, we got to go to war. He did teach that.
Wait, Luke, is this talking? Because I remember I found out there was 2 last time. Is this talking about the church history Eusebius or the other
This is
Eusebius
our
that came after?
Eusebius. Yes, this is our
What?
Eusebius.
That's crazy.
Guys, he wrote church history at the request of Constantine.
He basically established the first political Christian philosophy that can then be spread. And say Augustine took it and really ran with it. Because
But
Augustine, anyways.
but
Yeah.
still, even though that is true about Eusebius, Corey, you can't forget that the Orthodox and Catholics hate Origen's quotes the most when it comes to separation of government and church.
Sure. I don't
So,
I
so
understand that.
you have to admit Eusebius is contradicting Origen. Eusebius isn't following Origen and the things he says.
But this is where I could say, like, there is almost a spirit to it. Like, even in that quote that I had, say, from my that book that I've referenced, and when I went and pulled it up, we've talked about it a little bit. It's more of like this speculation of thinking, what if there was a nation that became Christian? How would that look? You know, and he's not saying necessarily that it's going to happen, but even just like this idea, and this idea I would say comes from more of like a, whenever you study Plato, there's like this whole idea of the republic and how they're going to establish a philosopher king and establish this great empire and nation that's ruled in perfection. And then you have, say, Augustine in his City of God, and he basically reestablishes um, the Republic, but in a Christian idea, which I would say is them trying to, say, create that Christian empire that Origen had speculated upon, which I don't disagree that maybe Origen wouldn't, I don't even think he would say that this is good. You know, I actually agree with you on that, but that doesn't mean that those ideas didn't open a door, you know.
No, they
And
didn't open a
again,
door, Corey. They didn't open a door. He said it's impossible for you to be in government and be a Christian. It didn't open a door. What he said did not open a door in any sense for him to say, if you Romans would just pray, then it'd be better for you. God would protect you. Citing
well, even the
passages.
kings, though, because that passage was directed towards like the Roman governors and the kings at the very beginning of it. It wasn't directed at necessarily the common people.
The quote that we're talking about, he says the people of the Romans should pray. He doesn't say the king needs to pray. But even if he did say the king should pray, that we ought to assume he means the king must abdicate his throne and become a Christian. Right?
I mean, I that's where I can say I can understand both ways, you know.
Wait,
And I'm
doesn't
just trying
Origen say you have to give up the throne to be a Christian?
I mean, yes, and that's where I'd say he does a lot of his whole thing is about establishing what is orthodox and continuing on orthodox teachings, and I understand that. But I'm also looking at, there's like two different stories that I'm kind of seeing in my head, and I'm not necessarily saying which one is right or wrong. I'm just pursuing the idea more, and I do wonder where these ideas come from, and it kind of always does go back to him, but that could be a scapegoat, so I'm just trying to pursue the matter out. Um,
Do you admit, Corey, that there's horrible falsification of Origen's writings and so much slander and so much misrepresentation of the man?
I mean, yes, it's kind of obnoxious to go through and try and sift through what he did say versus what he didn't say, and
Yes,
yes,
yes. What's real
it's
and what
obnoxious.
isn't?
Yeah, it really is obnoxious.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying I understand that people could even potentially have taken his writings, misrepresented him, and then used that in order to justify what they later did. Does that make sense? So maybe even it is. Anyways, I'm just trying to pursue those ideas out. Um, but I also would say there's this other idea that I would have say that what Eusebius said about him and the self castration was true. Demetrius kicked him out because he knew this, but he was trying to also respect Origen's wishes for it not to go public. He realized he was wrong, so he kind of went away from the more literalist view and kind of went off the other side of the boat and went more into an allegorical camp. Like psychologically, I can maybe see how those types of things would happen and how this might play out in a really and yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways,
but you don't know
I'm
if it
just trying.
happened.
It's just exactly, but you find a lot of different things to say on both sides, and there is a lot of controversy. And I'm not determining one way or the other. I am just trying to pursue where is the heresy that crept in, and how. And I say this too as it relates to today, you know, because I see a lot of the things that are happening, say back in the third century, happening today in a different context. This whole idea of even rallying Christians under, say, a political king, however that might look. I think that the Antichrist is going to get a lot of the Christians going and following him, thinking that they're doing it in the name of Christ. and how that might happen. And I see Constantine as a sort of archetype of what the Antichrist will look like, and how that happened, I think, can relate to how it's going to happen today. I'm just trying to understand the past in order to understand the present. And so I'm trying to pursue out what is the apostasy. And as it relates to even Second Thessalonians, before the return of our Lord Jesus Christ, there must come a great falling away, great apostasy. The man of sin must be revealed. God will send a great delusion upon the whole world for those who did not have a love for the truth. And I mean, I think this sort of happened back then, that apostasy, even as the fathers had basically told us was going to happen, but I think it's going to happen in a really catalyzing way. So I think this is it's a big question for me. And I'm not trying to, I can see, say, in the Chiliasm aspect, that I can hold to all these different things as an Orthodox teaching, right? And this teaching, if understood, would totally destroy any ability for Christians to ever try and establish a kingdom before Christ really returns. That view destroys it. You can't. That's why they had to change that. So where did that change? And I don't think that just happened again with Eusebius.
Poor Origin. I mean, getting accused of causing the marriage of
But
the
even
state.
with that, though,
I
you
mean,
can
he's
find that going back to Clement of Alexandria allegorizing to what the kingdom was. He's not someone that is, from what I understand, really representing a chiliastic millennial reign type of view. So no, I'm not just saying origin. It is more of like over in Alexandria, you had all this Platonic philosophy stuff going on, even
oh please,
whether
Corey,
it
don't
wasn't.
torture us. Don't torture us. Not with the Platonic
Yeah.
philosophy. It's
Well, you showed. I saw. I sent a quote earlier from Tertullian talking about how we shouldn't be mixing. What do we have to do with Athens?
yes,
Like
that's
he,
true. That's true. But Origin wasn't doing that when Tertullian is attacking it. He's not attacking Origin. The whole
but
church
there's
allegorized.
okay, but
Paul
what about the
allegorizes.
idea? There's two origins in the time of Alexandria. One of them we don't have any real writings from.
Oh,
Ended up
not that
studying
again,
under
Corey.
Plotinus. I mean, it's.
It's still Batman in the Batcave. You're still watching that.
I'm not even watching that. I'm trying to but see, this is where I would say I'm hesitant to even talk to you about it, because whenever, like,
Corey, you
I
should
don't
be.
think
You've got to leave it behind. That guy was insane. How can
I'm not
anything that
listening to
that guy?
him. I'm not even pursuing his ideas in this, and that's where I'm kind of getting gaslighted, which I'm not. I go,
Corey, you
I'm kind
got
of
that idea
hesitant
from
to
that
talk about
guy.
it.
You got that idea from that guy. I've never
I'm
heard
pursuing
anybody.
it. I've read before I got into that guy. I've read a whole bunch of other different things as it relates to kingdom views. I mean,
I mean,
I'm
have
not
you?
just getting it from
I'm
him.
just curious. Have you ever heard anybody else do this thing where they're getting two origins in history mixed up and saying they're the same person?
Well, you don't have any writings from one. I mean, there's a lot of people that will say that that was the same origin. I
Well,
mean, not just
actually,
him.
actually, Porphyry the pagan does name a book written by that other guy, a book on mathematics or something, if I remember correctly. I mean, the guy was clearly not the same origin. He was a pagan. Origen, at no time in his life, was a pagan. He was brought up in a Christian household. He was never a pagan philosophy, Corey. Don't you see the contradiction? Why would
I mean, I
Porphyry
understand what
call
you're
the
saying.
chief teacher of the Christians a pagan philosopher? Porphyry is a pagan. Why would he hates
Well, you can go
Christians?
and
You think
you
he
can go and
liked?
study under.
Wait a second.
You can go and study under like a philosopher and like
But wait, be logical, Corey.
like
The guy who made this insane conspiracy theory is not thinking logically. It's utter insanity. Think about this logically. Porphyry is a pagan. He says he knows about a pagan philosopher named Origen who wrote a book on mathematics, and he doesn't have much else to say about him. He just says he's kind of a lowly, not very great philosopher. He doesn't mention anything about him being a Christian, let alone the chief teacher of all the Christians, chief teacher of Alexandria. Why would anybody assume that that's the same origin? There's no reason in the world to think that.
well, I can go and look into it again, but I don't exactly have everything I can just pull up in my head. But yeah, I haven't had to necessarily listen to him, and I know I'm not looking to him as my teacher. I just like to glean from people what I can, where I can, and try to find what the truth is, and I will try and back that up with early church teachings. But like I said, I have been doing it by myself, like pretty much alone, and I don't think that I'm like crazy for looking into this, frankly. And I think that there are things to say that that may have been the same origin, and hypothetically, if that was right, I'll have to go and look into all of it.
Oh man, Corey, do you acknowledge that there could have been two people named Origin in history?
Yep.
That's not too difficult for you to believe.
Nope.
Well, Corey, if you can present a single reason why we should think a pagan philosopher named Origin, mentioned by a pagan, is the same as our Origin, who was brought up in a Christian household, who was never a pagan his whole life, if you can give me one reason to think that, I'll hear it. But that just sounds like utter nonsense, and it is. That ought to be obvious.
I mean, I will
It's
go
just, it's
and
just,
find what I can.
it's just a horrible slander made up by that crazy guy on that YouTube channel. I'm not a
He's not
tech.
the only one saying it, and man, I like you keep bringing him up, but like you can't keep bringing him up for like every time, everything. Like there's other things that will lead to these types of conclusions, and I don't think that it's wrong for me to pursue them out. That's all I'm really saying. And like I can get gaslit and basically like it is kind of a straw man just to get put under the umbrella of that guy because yes, I understand that guy has his faults. I totally get it. But I also have walked through a lot of different things in life and we have come from very different places in life to arrive at where we're at and not everyone has come to these not everyone has really looked into these things in this way. Like this is unique what we're doing here or what you're doing here, what's been started here. However, you want to look at it. But there's just a lot of controversy surrounding it and I would like to pursue it out and there are things that would go to say I can't again why does Origin not talk about New Jerusalem at all? And why is there like anyways. Yep. This yep.
I just want you to be free from any shackles of ignorance, Corey. It's not an attack against you. It's painful for me to see you not enjoying the wisdom of a righteous man like Origin and saying things like that about him. It just comes out of thin air. It's just so unnecessary.
Like I said, I'm pursuing the millennial topic and it leads me in fact to these things. And yep, I'm not trying to I don't completely know what happened, but yeah. I'll send you all the quotes I can as it relates to millennial reign and stuff. And I, the way that I see it is I'm trying to write out a thesis in my head in a way so that I can then present it in a way that isn't just taken as slander, but can at least be somewhat respected as a view that has some merit as to where it comes from, even if the conclusion is that people slandered Origin and then they used some mischaracterizations of him and it led to this idea of the millennial reign where they can be ruling and reigning and this is the apostasy and because of this we can then go and have this as a um, understanding for whenever we go and talk to Catholics and Orthodox and that they were anyways.
Well, I can definitely see how the church fell away, and I think it was because of legalization. I think I've got enough to work with. I'll still look
Yeah.
into it though, Corey. We all want to be educated. I want to be educated about what Origin taught. So I
Yeah.
would appreciate it if you sent the quotes.
Of him and the millennial reign stuff.
Yes.
Oh man, I have so many tabs open and I don't even. I will send it to you in a chat or message. But with him and the millennial reign, like I said, there isn't really. He has one talking about Revelation 20 and John, but
So
it was very
so you wouldn't say
vague.
there's any evidence, any conclusive evidence that he denies the millennial reign?
Uh, it's very vague. That's what I'm saying.
I
But
see. Well,
what the things I have found, they allude to it being more figurative.
I see. Well,
And yes,
if you would say it's
I'll
vague,
go.
Corey, it's got to be really vague.
Well, Luke,
I mean, there's a lot of things I
I'm just
read.
listening right now. Hold on, Corey. I'm just listening
Yeah,
right now. I just wanted to unmute for a moment. Even if hypothetically Origin did not believe in a literal millennial reign, so what? There were plenty of people in the early churches, Justin Martyr says, that didn't believe in a literal millennial reign and were still pious, righteous Christians.
Justin Martyr believed in a literal millennial reign and the
Oh,
coming of New
really,
Jerusalem.
Corey? Really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Thank you for telling me that. God, I'm out.
Corey, I don't think you're listening to what he said. He says all Christians in the church, the vast majority, do accept a literal millennial reign, but a few don't, and they're still Christians. That's what he's saying. You're making it sound like if you were to deny it, you're not a Christian or something, or like that's a heresy. But we're not into that Orthodox stuff saying you're a heretic if you don't understand the end times or the afterlife or something.
No, I'm just saying I'm honestly not sure what just happened there.
Or Nolan's perturbed at just your responses.
Sure.
What was the meaning
No.
of that response exactly? We already know that Justin Martyr believes in a literal millennium. Why were you pointing that out
Well,
to us
I
when we know that?
like everyone that I found early on, it believes that until say Eusebius, but there are questions of whether or not Origen and say Clement did.
Yes.
So it would be if they did hold to a different view, then it would be something different than what was held to earlier.
Yeah, but not a heresy, because the church didn't consider that to be a very important thing to know.
I mean, but what if part of that thing led to, like, it's more of like I said earlier, is like my heart of my life and why I'm willing to suffer, and I have suffered in my life a lot in different ways, is because I am looking towards the things that Christ has promised. Even why do we pray to the east? We're looking towards that kingdom, that city that's coming out of the sky, which will be our home, which is like the new Eden for us to return to, that place we are regathered whenever Christ comes back. He will come back with that city. When he left, he made us a promise that where I go to prepare a place that where I am, you may be also. And that place is New Jerusalem.
Well, some of the church
I mean,
fathers
it's not.
say the mansions that he prepares for us is our bodies, and we're not necessarily going to be eating physical fruit like that. We don't believe all of that is literal. I don't believe all that's literal. You're going to have the glory of Jesus. You're going to be shining like Jesus. That's going to be the essence of your body, like Jesus on the mount when Peter,
We will
James, and
be like
John.
Jesus. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you're going to
get
be like
that.
shining like the sun. That's going to be your essence. That's going to be what you are. You're not going to be literal
But
flesh and blood anymore.
I get that. It's like Origin basically said that it will be like the spirit is on the flesh rather than the flesh on the spirit. Like I I get that. I get the spiritual side of it too. I'm just saying like I do try and ground it in a literal thing as well. And I don't completely know what that looks like, but I mean, I
Well, Corey, it is hard. It is hard to defend Origin on two fronts. On the front of the Cathodox, they're saying, how dare this man deny that government can have anything to do with the faith? That you have to, give up political office, government office, even to become a Christian. How dare he say that? That's so extreme. And then on the other hand, Origin is attacked by people saying Origin caused the joining of the church with the state. I mean, poor Origin. Can you imagine being stabbed from both sides? Just two completely opposite accusations.
sure it's like a scapegoat. I get it.
Yeah, it's painful to hear it. I just feel sorry for him, and you can do your research, Corey, but you know that none of us believe any of that. Origen is our best witness against the church joining with the state. And he even quotes Celsus saying that all Christians believe that. That's the view of all the Christians, that we don't participate in political or government office. So
Sure.
we thank
Yeah.
Origen. We're very thankful for his book where he preserves that and tells us that was the view of all Christians and that Christians were criticized for it. And we know that Origen would never endorse that. He would never endorse us joining with the government. And we're not, that quote about Christians or Romans needing to pray instead of fight, we don't see that as any kind of proof that Origen was opening the door to some kind of sin. There's a righteous statement from him. It's
And nowhere here have I really like said you must believe this. This is just like I said, something I'm pursuing. I'm not calling them anything. I haven't come to necessarily conclusions. But I just find this is a very interesting topic because it's a central theme in the apostasy.
well, Corey.
And even just what happened with even the 16th century and whatnot, there's a lot of reoccurring themes. It's happened over time, and I've been watching and waiting and seeing it coming for a while now.
Well, make sure, Corey, that you're getting your food from your reading of the scriptures and the fathers, and don't spend too much time on this thing. Don't be obsessive about Origin. I would wish that you wouldn't obsess at all about him, but I understand if you want to study the topic, so be it. But just get your bread, because
Well, right now I'd say it's a side note really to a larger idea. Anyways, it's just more of can be a little bit more clearly expressed through um, either what people have said about Origin or Origin, which
Well, we repeat, Origen is the most slandered man in history, and horrible heretics invented false accusations against him. We do not believe that he ever castrated himself, but even if he had, it's one of the weakest accusations you could ever make against a man, that he, pursuing celibacy and perfect sexual purity, was willing to horribly hurt himself in order not to ever give in to sexual temptation. What kind of an accusation is that? Like, that's the best thing they can think of against Origen. It's just weak accusations. But Origen himself in his writing said if anybody does that, they're an idiot. He says nobody should ever castrate themselves. If anybody tries to use Christ's command that we make ourselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven as an excuse, if we use that statement as an excuse for castration, we have completely misunderstood Christ. So I can't really imagine him doing that when that is his view. I don't believe he changed his view. I believe that's the view of the whole church. And I believe it was a slander invented against him that he castrated himself. And it doesn't make sense. The story doesn't even make sense. Epiphanius says it doesn't make sense, and he was the first and the foremost accuser of Origen. And you can explore that if you want, Corey, but have you ever thought about how the accusation of Origen castrating himself is contradictory? Have you ever heard this view?
I mean, I've been thinking about all sides, frankly.
Well, let me introduce it to you in case you do still believe that. I'd like to give you some reasons not to, but it doesn't make any sense. Let's say Origen really did have some female catechumens. You know, Epiphanius pointed out female catechumens were never in any school. They were never sent to be instructed by themselves. They were always with male attendants. So there would never be a reason for Origen to say, I'm going to be castrated because, oh, I don't want to create a scandal. Like, I don't want people to think I'm alone with these women. Women were never alone with Origen. That was the rule. People were very modest about women. And if he's having some big lecture, he's not like taking one woman alone in his room or something. It's a lecture with a lot of people present, and they would have attendants present. So that would never be a concern, never be a reason for Origen to castrate himself. But secondly, if it's a contradiction, and it makes no sense to say he did it secretly, but then that he also did it to avoid scandal with the women. If you castrate yourself secretly, then that would mean there's no point in doing it if you're trying to, protect your reputation, because you would have to tell everybody that you're castrating yourself in order for them to know, oh, don't worry about this guy. He's castrated. He would never do anything with the women. You would have to announce it. Hey, guys, I castrated myself, so I'm safe with the women. But they say he did it secretly in order to avoid scandal with women. Do you see how that's a complete contradiction?
Well, I can see how if it would happen, it would be for the case of restraining yourself in general.
Well, he
But
would
yes,
never
no,
be. He'd never be alone with the women, though.
I mean, wasn't it part because he was a catechist or teaching the catechumens?
Yes, all the veiled catechumens. Yeah. Well, if you combine the fact that in his own writings he condemns it, and the fact that even his greatest critic doesn't believe the story, I really doubt it quite a bit. I do believe that it was something that Eusebius heard. Even if Eusebius hears it and believes the story, that doesn't mean that it's true. As you said yourself, Eusebius has not always accurately recorded things. So I don't believe the story.
Yep, and that's fine. Like I said, I'm just trying to look into early church history in general, and a lot of these things are part of it. And I'm trying to just build a larger picture in my head because I can hear a lot of things from a lot of people, but I also have to come to conclusions sort of in my own, or else it's not necessarily real. Um, but yes, I hear what you're saying, and I do listen to you, and frankly, I respect both of you, including you, Nolan, if you're still listening.
No, he had to leave. He's trying to restrain himself from getting angry at you, Corey.
Yeah, and that's why I'm quiet. But I do understand at the same time. I know I'm stepping on toes, which is
Yes,
yeah.
we love all the church fathers. So if we hear somebody say something about them, something demeaning or insulting in any way, especially very insulting, then we would react in the same way if we heard any of our Christian brothers being slandered, because we do seek to preserve their reputation, especially if they've been attacked a lot already so falsely accused by many very evil people. So Corey, we're not angry at you, but we want you to be saved, and we want you also not to be duped by any false accusations, especially a crazy guy saying that he is a pagan philosopher. I mean, that's an easy one, Corey. He's definitely not a pagan philosopher. He was born in a Christian household. He was at no time a pagan. That doesn't make any sense. That
He
guy.
was surrounded by pagans, though, and that's just the whole Alexandria thing. And I mean, if you go and look into like origin and just Platonic ideas, there's a myriad of different things that you can kind of pick up on. And he was, at the very least, around at the same time as a lot of the Neoplatonists. And I get that.
Corey,
I talk about
he was called Origen Adamantius because he crushed the heretics. Just because you're around pagans, I mean, what kind of an argument is that?
But I mean, the pagans and the Neoplatonists were arguing against the Gnostics as well, and very, it, as you would say, Plato did kind of rip off a lot of what came from, say, Moses, um, in a Greek context, but Plato has a lot of different. Plato went to Egypt. He was a student of the mystery schools going back to Pythagoras, playing with Socrates. And this is whenever I was in college, I majored in philosophy. I've studied Plato more than I can even explain. My literal past is trying to understand what the mystery schools were before I came to Christ. So I see a lot of these things going around, and it's like you can obviously say that Platonism influenced Christianity later with like St. Thomas Aquinas, but it does go back, and Platonism has its place in, say, like Kabbalah, even a lot of these different um, very occulty and antichrist, I guess, mindsets. But it's just Platonism in general is a very interesting thing, and
But also
I
misrepresented, as if it were not, as if it weren't derived from the Old Testament when it was. If people would acknowledge that one fact, they would see anything true in Platonism it's true in and of itself. It's not
how
because
would you explain that Tertullian quote that I had posted earlier, though? Just as an example with that.
we know that all the philosophers have taught foolish things, Corey, but they also have taught very wise and true things.
But that's where you can a little leaven at the whole lump. I mean, I get that there's a lot of truth in Platonism. Believe me, I'm I've been there. Like I've really been there. Um, but that's also again, like you would say with the whole coin, it's you can see understand that a plastic coin is not something the governments are really going to worry about, but one that is very close to the original is something that you're going to really look at. And that's where I'd say Platonism really does have a syncretic factor where they can mix and mingle their terms, and they're speaking one language and you're speaking another. You think they're saying one thing, but really they're saying another.
You know, Corey, all you have to do is give an example. And one of the examples you gave, and the most common example of what makes Clement of Alexandria and Origen a Platonist, is when they say he uses the term logos, and he really uses Plato's idea of the logos.
It's like the idea of the good, Like Origin talks about, or Alexandria, I've seen in a lot of his writings references the good a lot. It's a Platonic idea.
Oh, Plato
And
invented the idea of the good.
the good is a very essential theme within Platonism, yeah. And it's
Plato didn't.
basically, instead of the God, like God, it's the good. And I had one of my philosophy teachers. This was the central theme. He didn't believe in God, but he believed in the good. Like
Is
it's
that a false doctrine?
the that philosophy teacher and what he taught. Oh yeah, he was very like
And Origin teaches a false doctrine about the good that you've noticed?
no. I'm just saying I see that type of language, like what you could.
Corey, like, who cares? You can't point to a heresy, but you're going to say he's a Platonic philosopher and it's so dangerous, but you can't give any examples. All you have to
I
do,
will.
Corey, is give one example. I mean, it's always this ambiguous thing. It's just, oh, he uses logos. He says the good, or something ridiculous like that, Corey. When are people going to get over it? All you have to do is give an example, Corey. Give an example of a heresy. But it's always just some bizarre thing. Oh, maybe he was a pagan. Oh, he says the good, or he uses logos.
Am I not right to say that Origin lifted up Platonism insofar as something that we can kind of draw from?
Well,
And I get he didn't say that this is the truth, obviously,
Corey,
but
it's good that you're asking me because I'm a more objective source to ask. I'm not somebody who's been reading all these scholarly articles. I have just been reading the Church Fathers organically. And when I read the Church Fathers, I don't notice Origen saying something in contradiction to the other Church Fathers. I see all the Church Fathers as this unit that are all saying the same thing. So no, you would have to say something like, oh, they're all Platonic philosophers, which they love to say. They love to say the early church is so influenced by the philosophers. I don't believe that. I believe the philosophers were influenced by Moses. That's what the church teaches, and it's the truth. So no, you asked me, and my answer is I see Origen as being the same as the other church fathers, not at all opposed. And if you find something in particular that you think is a false doctrine, then show it. Say, I think this is a false doctrine. You said something like Origen, him and the millennial reign, and I say, well, do you think he's denying the millennial reign? You say, well, not really. It's really ambiguous. Okay.
a lot of the things I find are ambiguous. But part of that's it leads to, anyways.
It's Origen, or what it sounds to me like, Corey, as it is with
Can
all
I
these
say
scholars,
Platonism would corrupt?
it's just a witch hunt. It just goes on and on from the scholars. And that's why I don't listen to the scholars. I just read the church fathers. I wouldn't even know about these things that they're saying, all these accusations, if I hadn't read the scholars. If I just read the church fathers, I would just be edified by them, and I wouldn't be pained by these accusations.
I just like to look at both sides of things.
I like to hear accusations from reputable sources. If I heard the church fathers making these accusations against Origen, that'd be different. But we don't. We don't hear those church fathers attacking. The earliest
Tertullian, four of them.
Tertullian doesn't say anything against Origen.
No, I get that, but they weren't really around.
I know, but what were you saying about Tertullian?
I was just saying that if Tertullian does talk against the more figurative language, which is kind of directed sort of at Alexandria in certain respects.
Corey, everyone uses allegorical language. All the church fathers. Paul does it.
Wait, well, are you getting that from against Marcion?
Yeah, yes, I think so.
No, that's not what he was doing. It seems like he was doing it deliberately because of the Marcionite, not to use allegorical languages.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you don't have anything against Origen from that early period, Corey. So no, I don't take false accusations. If you read apostolic constitutions, it says you should never take an accuser's testimony if they're known to be a sinner. If you know it's an evil person, you don't take that person as a witness. So no, I don't believe in just all the witnesses. Oh, some scholar calls them of Platonism. That's not an accusation in my mind. You'd have to actually say Origen teaches a false doctrine, and here it is. You'd have to show that. Some scholar.
That's what I would. That's where I would say I'd rather write something out rather than talk it out in person, where I'm probably gonna I'm trying to be careful with my words and trying not to just say anything that's gonna upset someone or say something wrong, even if I said right there if it was from this book, and I don't even honestly know. I've
Well,
read
Corey, I already know that you've gone to sources that are just horrid, just completely insane conspiracy theorists. So, no, Corey, you need help. You need to stop listening to bad sources. You need to just read the church fathers and just probably forget about origin and this stuff for a while. Just read the church fathers and read the scriptures because it's just not healthy for you. You're
I'm
learning
only
things that
talking
aren't true.
today because it came up, man. I haven't been on it. I have been reading quite a bit while I'm doing a whole bunch of other things at the same time. I'm trying, man. And for anyone else listening, I am trying. And yeah,
Well, I'll probably be going to bed, guys.
I'm probably gonna head out too because I gotta get up for work soon.
All right. Well, farewell, everybody. God be with you all. I hope you enjoyed the call.
Yeah.
All right. Bye for now. Talk to you later.